Japan doesn't mess about when it comes to horror stories. While Western ghost tales might give you a gentle shiver, Japanese urban legends will have you checking under your bed, avoiding mirrors and seriously reconsidering that late-night bathroom trip. Drop a comment with the exact time you're watching this. Trust me, you'll want witnesses for what's coming. Smash that like button and subscribe because we're diving face first into Japan's most spine-chilling urban legends. These aren't just campfire stories. Each legend we're exploring has terrified generations, shaped behavior, and left grown adults sleeping with the lights on. From slit-mouthed women prowling school grounds to cursed phone calls from the dead, Japan's urban legends don't just want to scare you, they want to crawl inside your head and set up permanent residence. Ready to meet your new nightmares? Part 1. The Slit-Mouthed Woman. You're walking home from school in 1970s Japan. The streetlights flicker on as dusk settles over the quiet suburban streets. That's when you see her. A woman in a beige trench coat stands under a lamppost ahead. Her long black hair cascades over her shoulders, and she's wearing a surgical mask, nothing unusual in Japan. She seems to be waiting for something, or someone. As you approach, she turns toward you. Her eyes are kind, almost motherly. She tilts her head slightly and asks in a soft voice, "Watashi kirei, am I pretty?" You pause. Something feels wrong, but she's just a woman asking a simple question. Being polite, you nod, "Yes, you're pretty." That's when she reaches up and slowly pulls down her mask. Her mouth has been cut from ear to ear in a grotesque Glasgow smile. The wounds are fresh, glistening red in the lamplight. Blood trickles down her chin as she grins impossibly wide, revealing teeth stained crimson. "Core demo?" she asks, her voice now a wet whisper. "How about now?" You try to run, but your legs won't move. Fear has turned your muscles to concrete. She reaches into her coat and pulls out a pair of scissors, the metal gleaming under the streetlight. "If you think I'm pretty," she says, stepping closer, "I'll make you just like me." Meet Kuchisake Onna, the slit-mouthed woman. She's Japan's most famous urban legend, and she's been terrorizing children for over 40 years. The story goes that she was once a beautiful woman, either a samurai's wife or a vain socialite, depending on who's telling the tale. Her husband caught her cheating and punished her by slitting her mouth from ear to ear with a sword. "Who will think you're beautiful now?" he asked as she bled out. Death, it turns out, didn't stop her vanity. It just made it deadly. She returns as a vengeful spirit, roaming the streets at night, particularly targeting children and teenagers. Her modus operandi is always the same. The innocent question, the horrific reveal, then the attack with scissors or a knife. But here's where it gets properly twisted. You can't just run from Kuchisake Onna. She's faster than any human, capable of appearing and disappearing at will. If you say she's ugly when she first asks, she'll kill you immediately. If you say she's pretty, she'll mutilate you to match her appearance. The legend spread like wildfire through Japan in the late 1970s. Schools had to increase security. Parents refused to let children walk alone after dark. Police received thousands of reports of sightings, though they never found any evidence. But the panic was real. Children developed elaborate strategies to escape her, carrying hard candy. She's apparently easily distracted by sweets, asking her riddles she's not very bright, or shouting specific words like pomade 3 times. The word confuses her enough to create an opening for escape. Some versions of the legend claim she was disfigured in a car accident or botched plastic surgery, which explains her 1970s resurgence, a time when Japan was becoming obsessed with Western beauty standards and cosmetic procedures. The slit-mouthed woman represents every fear about feminine beauty twisted into something monstrous. She's the perfect predator, appearing harmless, even attractive, before revealing her true nature. She preys on politeness, using social courtesy as a trap. What makes Kuchisake Onna particularly terrifying is her persistence. Other ghosts might haunt specific locations, But she's mobile. She could be anywhere, at any time, waiting under any streetlight. The legend has evolved with the times. Modern versions have her driving a red car, lurking near schools, or even appearing online. She's been spotted in shopping malls, train stations, and playgrounds. The setting changes, but the horror remains constant. In 2007, a horror film called Carved brought Kuchisake Onna to international attention, but the movie couldn't capture what made the original legend so effective: its simplicity. No elaborate backstory, no complex mythology, just a woman, a question, and a pair of scissors. The genius of the slit-mouthed woman is that she could be real. Unlike vampires or werewolves, she doesn't require belief in the supernatural. She's just a psychotic woman with a weapon and a compulsion. That possibility, however remote, keeps the legend alive. Children still whisper about her in schoolyards. Parents still feel a chill when their kids are late coming home. Urban legends need that kernel of believability to survive, and Kuchisake Onna has it in spades. She's taught generations of Japanese children that beauty can be deceiving, strangers are dangerous, and politeness might get you killed. Not bad for a dead woman with a grudge. But the slit-mouthed woman is just the beginning. Japan's urban legends get much darker, much weirder, and much more creative in their methods of psychological torture. Speaking of creative torture, let's talk about what happens when a train accident creates something that refuses to stay dead. Part 2. Teke, Teke. You hear it first, a scraping sound echoing through the empty train station. Teki, 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 Teki. It's past midnight, and you're the only person waiting for the last train home. The platform stretches endlessly in both directions, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights that flicker and buzz overhead. The sound is getting closer. Teke, 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 Teke. You peer down the platform, trying to locate the source. That's when you see movement in the shadows between the pillars, something low to the ground, moving with unnatural speed. It's a girl, maybe 16, wearing a blood-stained school uniform. She's crawling toward you with her arms, pulling herself forward with desperate clawing motions. Her long black hair whips behind her as she moves. But she's only half there. Her body ends at the waist. Where her legs should be, there's nothing but empty air and a trail of something dark smeared across the concrete. She's moving impossibly fast for someone dragging themselves along the ground. That's the teke teke sound. Whole fingernails scraping against concrete, her bones grinding, her determination to share her condition with absolutely everyone she meets. "Help me," she calls out, her voice echoing off the station walls. "I can't feel my legs." Well, that's because they're probably somewhere near Shibuya Station still. Love. This is Teke, Teke, the girl who took persistent to supernatural levels. She fell onto train tracks, either pushed, jumped, or just had spectacularly bad timing and got bisected by an express train. Death should have been the end of her commute, but apparently she's got places to be. The train cut her clean in half, but her upper body had other plans. She came back as an Onri, a vengeful spirit with a very specific disability and an even more specific method of sharing it with others. She moves faster than any human should be able to crawl. We're talking supernatural speed here, like she's got rocket boosters attached to her elbows. She can keep pace with running people, which is frankly showing off at this point. When she catches you, not if, when, because she's remarkably good at this, she produces a scythe from somewhere about her person, probably keeps it in a handbag. She then cuts you in half, making you just like her. It's like a twisted mentorship program. Welcome to the half-person club. Here's your complimentary eternal torment. The 1980s were her golden era, coinciding with Japan's railway expansion and general obsession with moving fast. Trains became symbols of progress, but Teke Teke was the reminder that sometimes progress can literally cut you in half and leave you crawling around train stations for eternity. She doesn't attack randomly, though. She's got standards. She targets people who are alone, vulnerable, waiting for something that might not come. The tired businessman missing the last train. The student studying too late. The person who thought an empty train station was peaceful rather than absolutely terrifying. The sound is her signature calling card. Tiki-tiki. 2 syllables that can make a grown adult check over their shoulder for the rest of their life. It's the sound of fingernails on concrete, of determination overcoming anatomy, of someone who really should have stayed dead but couldn't be bothered. Some versions give her additional powers because apparently being a supernatural speed crawler wasn't enough. She can phase through walls, predict where you're running, and manifest wherever there are train tracks. She's like a very gory GPS system. Modern versions have adapted to contemporary transport systems. She's been spotted in subway tunnels, airport corridors, and probably Uber pools at this point. Technology advances, but the basic principle remains: half a person moving way too fast and wanting to share the experience. The railway companies have been remarkably tactful about the whole situation. They focus on platform safety without mentioning the supernatural elements, which is probably wise. Please stand back from the platform edge to avoid trains and vengeful crawling ghosts. Wouldn't fit on most warning signs. What makes Teke Teke particularly nasty is her efficiency. She's not interested in lengthy conversations or complicated rituals. She sees you, she crawls over, she cuts you in half. It's a very streamlined haunting process, really. No fuss, no muss, just immediate dissection. She's also proof that some people, even dead people, just don't know when to quit. Most ghosts haunt specific locations or focus on particular grievances. Teke Teke has made mobility her entire afterlife identity. She's turned being cut in half into a career. The scraping sound follows you home, by the way. Once you've heard it, you'll catch yourself listening for it in empty hallways, quiet streets, anywhere that echoes. Teke, 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 Teke. The sound of someone who refused to let a little thing like death and dismemberment slow her down. But if you think a determined half-girl is troubling, wait until you meet the 7-year-old who's turned school bathrooms into a personal haunting ground and made Do You Want to Play? The 3 most terrifying words in the Japanese language. Part 3. Hanako-san of the toilet. You really shouldn't have drunk that entire bottle of water during maths class. It's break time at your Japanese middle school, and you're practically dancing with the need to pee. The girls' bathroom on the 3rd floor is closest, but as you push open the door, you remember what your friends whispered yesterday. They said she lives here. The bathroom is eerily quiet. Your footsteps echo off the tile walls as you walk past the sinks. The mirrors reflect only your own nervous face, which is somehow more unsettling than if they'd shown something else entirely. You count the stalls. 1, 2, 3. Never use the 3rd stall. That's the rule. But counting from which end, left to right, or right to left, your bladder is screaming at you to just pick one, but your friend's warning echoes in your head. That's when you hear it. A small voice, barely above a whisper, coming from the 3rd stall from the left. Are you there? You freeze. The voice belongs to a child, maybe 7 years old. It sounds lonely, desperate, like someone who's been waiting for a very long time. Are you there? It asks again, more urgently this time. Against every survival instinct screaming at you to run, you find yourself answering, "Yes, I'm here. Do you want to play with me?" The toilet paper dispenser in the stall next to you suddenly unrolls, paper cascading to the floor in long white streams. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a door slams. Meet Hanako-san, the 7-year-old who's given generations of Japanese children trust issues about public bathrooms. She's got bobbed hair, wears a 1950s school uniform, and has been dead for roughly 70 years, which has done absolutely nothing to dampen her enthusiasm for making friends. She died in this very bathroom during World War II. The details vary depending on who's telling the story, but they all end the same way. A little girl trapped forever in a toilet stall waiting for someone to talk to. Death, it seems, gets quite boring after the first few decades. The summoning ritual is beautifully simple, which is probably why it's so popular. Go to the girl's bathroom on the 3rd floor, knock 3 times on the 3rd stall door, ask Hanako-san, "Are you there?" If she answers, congratulations, you've just made the worst friend of your life. What happens next depends on your response to her invitation to play. Say yes, and she drags you down the toilet into whatever hellish dimension 7-year-old ghosts call home. Say no, and she gets upset. Properly upset. The kind of upset that ends with you joining her permanent sleepover in the afterlife. But here's the truly diabolical part. She's designed specifically to exploit children's natural politeness. You can't just ignore her. She's a child asking if you want to be friends. Every decent impulse you've been taught screams at you to be kind to the lonely little girl. Those decent impulses will get you flushed to hell. She appears as a typical 1950s schoolgirl. Red skirt, white blouse, bobbed haircut. Sometimes she's normal looking. Sometimes she's covered in blood. Occasionally she has 3 heads, because apparently even ghost children go through awkward phases. The bathroom setting is genius. These are private spaces where everyone is vulnerable, literally caught with their pants down. You can't run effectively. You can't call for help without admitting you were talking to toilet ghosts. And you absolutely cannot fight back against a 7-year-old, even a supernatural one. Schools across Japan have had to develop unofficial Hanako protocols. Don't use the 3rd stall. Don't go to the bathroom alone. If you hear a child's voice and there are no children around, assume it's her and leave immediately. It's like nuclear safety procedures, but for toilet ghosts. Modern technology hasn't helped. Motion sensor lights can trap you in darkness if you stand still too long, making you wonder if Hanako's trying to save on electricity bills. Automatic flush toilets activate on their own, which might be her trying to demonstrate how the portal to hell works. Some children carry protective charms or recite specific phrases before entering bathrooms. Others have developed elaborate checking procedures. Look under every stall door, count twice, always have an escape route planned. It's like bomb disposal training for primary school students. The truly paranoid avoid school bathrooms entirely, developing legendary bladder control in the process. Japanese children have some of the strongest urinary systems in the world, probably thanks to Hanako-san. What makes her particularly insidious is her age. She's not a vengeful adult or a teenager driven by passion. She's a child with a child's simple desire for companionship, perverted by death into something predatory. She's every parent's nightmare, their kid encountering something that looks like another child but wants to play forever. Literally forever. The friendship she offers comes with a significant downside. You have to be dead to participate. It's like joining an exclusive club where the membership fee is your life, and the benefits are eternal toilet haunting. With a cheerful 7-year-old who hasn't had a proper conversation since the Truman administration. She's also remarkably persistent. Unlike other ghosts who might give up if you ignore them, Hanako-san will keep asking if you want to play until you give her an answer. Silence isn't an option. Pretending you can't hear her just makes her louder. Some stories claim she travels through the plumbing system, able to emerge from any toilet connected to the same water supply. This has led to increased vigilance around automatic toilets, which can suddenly activate and make you wonder if she's trying to communicate through interpretive flushing. The legend has evolved beyond schools. Modern versions have her appearing in shopping mall bathrooms, train station facilities, and even private homes. She's apparently expanded her franchise operation, because why limit yourself to educational institutions when there are toilets everywhere? But she's most effective in her original setting. Old school bathrooms with flickering lights, echoing tile walls, and that particular smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with decades of fear. These are spaces where imagination runs wild, and every sound could be supernatural. Hanako-san has made Do You Want to Play? One of the most terrifying questions in Japanese. It's a simple request that should warm your heart coming from a lonely child. Instead, it freezes your blood and makes you question every charitable impulse you've ever had. She's proof that some friendships come with hidden costs, and some playmates want more than just your time. They want your soul, your life, and your permanent residency in a toilet stall. But if you think a dead child asking for playdates is disturbing, wait until you meet the gentleman who's elevated bathroom encounters into high art, complete with color-coordinated murder options and customer service that'll kill you. Part 4, aka Manto Red Cloak. You've made it through another soul-crushing day at the office, and all you want is to use the bathroom in peace before catching your train home. The men's room is blissfully empty. You choose the end stall for maximum privacy and settle in for what should be a perfectly ordinary biological function. That's when you realize you've made a fatal error in bathroom planning. No toilet paper. You check the dispenser. Empty. You scan desperately for spare rolls, tissues, napkins, anything. Nothing. You're trapped, literally caught with your pants down, when footsteps echo off the tiled walls. Thank God. Another human being who can solve your predicament. Excuse me, you call out, swallowing your embarrassment. Could you pass me some toilet paper? The footsteps stop directly outside your stall. There's a pause so long you start to wonder if the person's having a stroke. Then a deep, cultured voice asks, red paper or blue paper? You blink. Sorry, what? Red paper or blue paper? You can see expensive leather shoes under the stall door now, polished to a mirror shine. A long red cloak pools around them like spilled wine. I don't understand, you say, though a cold dread is creeping up your spine. I just need regular toilet paper. Red paper or blue paper? The voice is getting impatient, with an edge that makes your skin crawl. You have to choose. But something in that voice tells you this decision is about more than toilet paper. Much more. Meet aka Manto, the Red Cloak, Japan's most impeccably dressed bathroom murderer. He's a gentleman killer who's turned a simple request for toilet paper into a multiple-choice death exam, because apparently even supernatural entities believe in giving their victims options. He appears in public bathrooms, particularly the last stall of men's facilities in schools, office buildings, and train stations. He's described as tall, handsome, and well-dressed, wearing either a red cloak or an elegant red mask. Think Phantom of the Opera meets public restroom serial killer. His appearance isn't the problem, it's his customer service approach to murder. Red paper or blue paper? Choose red, and he'll slice you up so thoroughly that your blood will decorate the bathroom walls like abstract art. Choose blue, and he'll strangle you until your face matches his color scheme, then hang you from the stall door like a grisly Christmas ornament. Think you're clever? Try requesting a different color. Yellow gets you drowned in the toilet bowl. Green means acid bath. Pink equals flaying alive. Purple involves dismemberment with a rusty spoon. The man has apparently spent considerable time developing a comprehensive color-coordinated murder menu. It's like death by interior design consultation. Some versions claim that refusing to choose might save you, but others insist that silence just offends his professional standards. A few stories suggest asking for white or regular toilet paper could work, but that's a gamble with your intestines as collateral. AKA Manto represents bathroom anxiety taken to its logical extreme. He's turned the most vulnerable moment of your day, when you're literally caught with your pants down, into a trivia contest where every wrong answer means creative dismemberment. He emerged during Japan's economic bubble in the 1990s, when appearance and status became national obsessions. It's fitting that a period obsessed with image would produce a killer dressed like a fashion magazine editor with homicidal tendencies. What makes him particularly nasty is his politeness. He doesn't burst into your stall screaming and swinging weapons. He knocks. He waits. He gives you choices. He's turned murder into a civilized transaction, which somehow makes it infinitely worse than random violence. He's also remarkably patient. Some stories describe him waiting outside stalls for hours, asking his question repeatedly until his victim is forced to respond. Imagine being trapped in a bathroom with a supernatural customer service representative who won't take "I need to think about it" for an answer. The bathroom setting is crucial. These are spaces where social rules break down, where people feel judged and vulnerable. AKA Manto embodies those anxieties, literally judging your color preferences while you're at your most defenseless. Modern versions have adapted to changing bathroom technology. Motion sensors that malfunction, trapping people in darkness with him, automatic toilets that won't stop flushing, creating a whirlpool effect for his drowning methodology, electronic locks that jam at precisely the wrong moment. He's also evolved his questioning technique. Some stories have him asking about different types of paper, glossy or matte, thick or thin, scented or unscented. He's keeping up with consumer trends while maintaining his core business model of bathroom-based murder. The red and blue color scheme isn't accidental. In Japanese culture, red represents life and passion, while blue symbolizes death and the supernatural. He's offering you a choice between two types of destruction, but both roads lead to the same destination: very creative death in a public toilet. Protection rituals have developed around his legend. People avoid the last stall in public bathrooms, carry emergency toilet paper supplies, or recite protective phrases before entering. The truly paranoid check for expensive shoes and red fabric before conducting any bathroom business. But perhaps most disturbing is his civility. He's not a mindless monster or grief-driven spirit. He's a rational entity who's chosen murder as a hobby and developed an elaborate system around it. He's turned killing into performance art with audience participation. In a culture that values politeness and proper social behavior, aka Manto is the ultimate perversion of etiquette. He follows all the rules of polite conversation while planning your dismemberment. He's proof that good manners and homicidal intentions aren't mutually exclusive. He's also uniquely Japanese in his attention to detail. Western bathroom legends might feature generic killers, but Japan gives you a murderer with a comprehensive style guide. He's prepared for every possible color preference, which shows a level of customer service dedication that would be admirable if it weren't completely terrifying. The legend continues to evolve, with new color options added regularly. Recent versions include coral, chartreuse, and magenta, each with their own specific murder methodology. He's like a supernatural Pantone color guide with lethal consequences. AKA Manto has made bathroom breaks into strategic planning sessions. Do you really need to go? Can you wait until you get home? Is it worth risking an encounter with a fashion-obsessed serial killer just to empty your bladder? These are the questions modern life forces us to consider, and somehow that seems perfectly normal now. Speaking of perfectly normal appearing threats that turn out to be absolutely anything but, let's meet the woman who made being tall into every parent's worst nightmare and turned lullabies into hunting calls. Part 5. Hachishaku-sama, 8-foot-tall woman. You're visiting your grandmother in the countryside for the summer, trading Tokyo's neon chaos for rice fields and the kind of silence that makes city kids nervous. Your grandmother's house is old, traditional, and covered in more protective charms than a paranormal investigator's toolkit. Paper talismans hang from every window and doorframe. Salt lines mark each threshold. Your uncle checks the locks obsessively, which seems excessive for a village where the biggest crime is probably someone stealing melons. Why all the protection, you ask your grandmother, as she hangs yet another charm. She glances toward the window, then back at you. Some things are older than the village, older than the families. We keep them out, and they leave us alone. What kind of things? Before she can answer, you hear it drifting through the evening air. Poho, poho. The sound is soft, melodious, almost like a lullaby. Your grandmother's face goes white. She grabs your arm with surprising strength for someone her age. Away from the windows now. But you've already seen her. A woman stands at the edge of the rice field, impossibly tall against the darkening sky. 8 feet at least, maybe more. Her long black hair hangs loose around her shoulders, and her white dress seems to glow in the fading light. She's looking directly at your window. When she sees you watching, she smiles. A warm, motherly expression and waves. The gesture is gentle, inviting. She beckons for you to come outside. You want to. Something about her presence is deeply comforting, like a mother calling her child home for dinner, but your grandmother's grip tightens. Don't look at her. Don't listen to her. And whatever you do, don't go outside. Meet Hachishi-Kusama, the 8-foot-tall woman who's taken maternal instincts and weaponized them into the most patient hunting strategy in supernatural history. She's ancient, possibly prehistoric, bound to rural areas by barriers and rituals that have protected villages for generations. But those protections are failing, one broken charm at a time. The po sound is her calling card, a hypnotic vocalization that draws children like a supernatural Pied Piper. It's not threatening, it's not scary, it's soothing, comforting, the kind of sound that makes you feel safe and loved. That's exactly what makes it so dangerous. Hachishi-Kusama doesn't snatch children randomly like some B-movie monster. She's a strategist. She studies her targets from a distance, learning their routines, their fears, their weaknesses. She's the kind of predator who does her homework. Once she's chosen a child, she begins a psychological campaign that would impress military tacticians. She appears at windows, in gardens, at the edges of forests, always smiling, always beckoning, always just out of reach of the adults who might interfere. Here's the truly insidious part. Adults can't see her. Only children and those who've encountered her before can perceive her presence. She can stalk her prey openly, while remaining invisible to potential protectors. It's like having a supernatural hunting license. Your parents think you're making up stories. Your teachers assume you're seeking attention. Your friends might believe you. But what can they do against something that towers over grown men and moves through rice fields like mist? When she finally makes her move, it's swift and decisive. No screaming, no struggle, no trace. One moment the child is there, the next they've vanished forever. The only evidence is that lingering paw, drifting on the wind. Where do they go? Some say she takes them to another dimension, a place where time moves differently and children become part of her eternal collection. Others claim she devours them, feeding on youth and innocence like a vampire feeds on blood. A few whisper that she's gathering children for something larger, more sinister, that the disappearances are just preparation for some apocalyptic event that requires an army of stolen children. What makes Hachishi-Kusama particularly terrifying is her maternal disguise. She doesn't look like a monster. She looks like everyone's idealized mother, tall, elegant, nurturing. She's designed to appeal to children's natural trust of adult women, exploiting protective instincts against the very people she wants to protect. The height is crucial. In rural Japan, where average height has always been modest, someone 8 feet tall is genuinely monstrous. She towers over rice fields like a giant, visible from impossible distances. She's literally larger than life, a figure from nightmares made manifest. Villagers that know about her have developed elaborate defense systems. Families perform cleansing ceremonies, maintain protective barriers, and keep constant watch during certain times of year. They know she's out there, patient as stone, waiting for their vigilance to slip. The rural setting amplifies her power. Cities have streetlights, security cameras, and neighbors who might intervene. The countryside offers isolation, darkness, and traditions that urban areas have abandoned. Ancient fears thrive in places where modernity hasn't fully taken hold. Children who've encountered her but escaped describe being paralyzed by her presence, unable to run or call for help. She has a hypnotic effect that goes beyond just her voice. Her entire being seems designed to overwhelm a child's ability to resist. The po becomes an earworm that follows survivors for life. They hear it in wind through trees, in the rhythm of footsteps, in their own breathing when they're afraid. It's a sound that once heard never truly goes away. Modern versions have her appearing near highways, luring children from broken-down cars. Some stories place her in suburban neighborhoods, hiding behind houses and following school buses. She's adapted to contemporary life while maintaining her core hunting methodology. But she's most effective in her traditional territory, rice fields under starlight, where ancient barriers between human and supernatural worlds are thinnest. She's a reminder that progress can't protect against everything. Some threats are older than civilization itself. Parents in affected areas develop hypervigilance that borders on paranoia. Children are kept indoors after dark. Windows are sealed with charms. Family traditions that might seem quaint to outsiders become matters of life and death. The internet has spread her legend beyond rural communities, with urban dwellers sharing stories about encountering impossibly tall women in white, city parks, empty lots, anywhere with enough space for something 8 feet tall to hide and hunt. But the original legend remains rooted in the countryside, where rice grows in endless fields and the horizon stretches unbroken to mountains that hide older, darker things than anyone wants to acknowledge. Hashishiku-sama represents parental anxiety at its purest, a predator who specifically targets children, who's patient enough to stalk them for weeks, and who's powerful enough to simply take them without leaving any evidence. She's every nightmare about child safety given form and hunting license. The maternal disguise makes her exponentially worse. Children are taught to trust adult women, to seek help from mothers and grandmothers. She perverts that trust, using protective instincts as bait for a trap that's been claiming children for longer than recorded history. She's still out there, by the way, still hunting, still calling children with that gentle po-po that sounds like love, but means death. And she's patient enough to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect child, the perfect opportunity to add another victim to her ancient collection. Speaking of ancient collections and stories that shouldn't be told, let's discuss the tale that's supposedly so horrifying it can kill people just by being narrated, though naturally that's never stopped anyone from trying to tell it. Part 6. Gozu Cowhead Story. You're on a school trip, packed into a tour bus with 30 other students heading to some historical site that nobody actually wants to visit. The teacher's droning on about ancient temples while everyone else is trying to sleep or playing games on their phones. That's when your mate Tanaka stands up and announces he knows a story. A really good one. Something he heard from his older brother, who heard it from a university student, who swore it was absolutely true. The teacher tries to shut him down, but the other kids are interested now. Anything's better than hearing about the cultural significance of roof tiles from the Edo period. It's called Gozu, Tanaka says, grinning like he's about to reveal the secrets of the universe. The cow head story. But I have to warn you, people say it's so scary that anyone who hears it dies or goes insane or both. Half the bus laughs. The other half leans forward. I'm serious, Tanaka continues. There was this class trip just like ours, and the teacher told this story to keep the kids entertained. By the time he finished, 3 students had fainted, 2 were catatonic, and 1 jumped out the window at the next rest stop. The teacher is frantically trying to get Tanaka to sit down, but he's committed now, he's got an audience, and teenage boys never pass up the chance to terrify their classmates. The story goes like this. That's when the bus driver slams on the brakes. Meet Gozu, the story that literally cannot be told. It's Japan's ultimate literary weapon, a tale so horrifying that simply hearing it can drive people mad, cause instant death, or worse. And naturally, this has made it the most sought-after story in Japanese folklore. The legend claims that Gozu originated in ancient times, possibly as far back as the Heian period. It involves a cow's head, obviously, but beyond that, nobody knows the actual content because everyone who's heard the complete version is either dead, insane, or keeping very quiet about their experience. Various sources describe different effects of hearing the story. Some say listeners die immediately upon its conclusion. Others claim people fall into catatonic states, become violently ill, or develop supernatural abilities they can't control. A few accounts suggest that hearing Gozu opens a door to other dimensions that really should stay closed. The most common version of the legend involves a teacher on a school trip, eerily similar to your current situation, who tells the story to entertain students during a long bus ride. As he progresses through the tale, children begin fainting, screaming, or behaving in ways that suggest their sanity has taken a holiday. The teacher, realizing something's gone horribly wrong, tries to stop mid-story. But here's the twisted part. Once you start telling Gozu, you can't stop. The story takes control, forcing the narrator to continue even as their audience dies around them. It's like a supernatural TED talk that's gone completely mental. By the time the bus reaches its destination, several students are dead, more are catatonic, and the teacher has aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The authorities suppress the incident, but whispers spread through the education system like a virus. What makes Gozu particularly insidious is its meta-textual nature. It's a story about the power of stories themselves. It suggests that some knowledge is too dangerous to share, that some narratives can literally kill their audience. It's every writer's nightmare, and every censor's justification rolled into one terrifying package. The cowhead element is deliberately vague in most versions. Some describe it as a disembodied bovine head that speaks prophecies. Others suggest it's part of a ritual involving ancient gods that humanity has wisely forgotten. A few versions hint that the cowhead is metaphorical, representing something far worse that the human mind can only process as familiar farm animals. Modern versions have adapted to contemporary fears. Some stories place Gozu on internet forums, where reading the complete text causes computer screens to crack and readers to suffer mysterious accidents. Others have it as a video file that corrupts every device it touches while driving viewers to madness. The truly paranoid claim that Gozu still exists in fragments, scattered across different sources to prevent any one person from accessing the complete version. They say government agencies monitor for people collecting these pieces, because someone assembling the full story could trigger a supernatural catastrophe. This has led to an underground community of Gozu hunters, people obsessed with finding and reconstructing the original tale. They trade fragments through encrypted channels, always stopping short of completing the puzzle because even they aren't quite stupid enough to test whether the legend is true. The irony is delicious. Gozu has become famous for being too dangerous to tell, which naturally makes everyone want to hear it. It's the ultimate forbidden fruit, a story that promises the most terrifying experience imaginable while threatening to kill anyone brave enough to listen. Some scholars suggest that Gozu represents ancient oral tradition warnings about the power of narrative. Stories shape reality, and some stories might reshape it in ways that break the human mind. It's a reminder that knowledge comes with responsibility, and some knowledge might be too heavy for mortals to carry. Others argue that Gozu is a modern creation, designed to prey on information age anxieties about viral content and memetic hazards. In an era where ideas spread globally in seconds, the concept of a lethal story feels less supernatural and more like biological warfare using words instead of viruses. The teacher angle is particularly nasty. Educators are supposed to protect and enlighten their students, not accidentally murder them with inappropriate story choices. Gozu turns every classroom into a potential killing field and every teacher into an unwitting weapon. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Gozu is its completeness as a legend. It doesn't just threaten individuals, it threatens the very concept of storytelling itself. If stories can kill, then every narrative becomes a potential weapon, and every audience becomes potential casualties. The bus driver who slammed on the brakes. He'd heard whispers about Gozu from other drivers. School trip routes of unofficial blacklists of stories that shouldn't be told, and experienced drivers know to intervene before teachers accidentally commit mass murder through inappropriate entertainment choices. Tanaka never got to finish his story, which probably saved everyone's lives. Though some say he wasn't actually going to tell Gozu at all, he was just using its reputation to build suspense before launching into some completely harmless ghost story. Or maybe he really did know fragments of the original, and the bus driver's intervention prevented a supernatural disaster that would have made international news. Either way, the cowhead story remains untold, which is exactly how it should be. Some doors shouldn't be opened, some knowledge shouldn't be shared, and some stories should stay buried forever. Speaking of things that should stay buried but absolutely refuse to cooperate, let's discuss the curse that's turned the internet into a hunting ground and made pop-up ads literally deadly. Part 7. Red Room Curse. You're pulling an all-nighter, grinding through a university assignment that's due tomorrow morning. It's 3 a.m., you're running on energy drinks and pure panic, and your laptop is the only source of light in your darkened dorm room. The research is mind-numbing. Something about economic policy that makes watching paint dry seem thrilling by comparison. You're clicking through academic papers when a pop-up appears on your screen. That's odd. You've got ad blockers installed, and this doesn't look like a typical advertisement. It's just a simple dialogue box with blood-red text against a black background. "Do you like the Red Room?" it asks. You try to close it, but clicking the X does nothing. The pop-up won't respond to any commands. You try Alt+4, Control+Alt+Delete, even unplugging your mouse. Nothing works. "Do you like the Red Room?" it asks again. The text seems to be getting larger, or maybe you're just staring at it too long. Your eyes are watering from the bright red letters against the black void. You decide to restart the computer, but as your finger reaches for the power button, the pop-up speaks. A child's voice, distorted and mechanical, emanates from your speakers. "Do you like the Red Room?" That's when you notice something else. The red text is starting to pulse, like a heartbeat. And with each pulse, your room seems to get a little darker, a little smaller, a little more red. Meet the Red Room Curse, the urban legend that turned innocent pop-up ads into harbingers of doom and made tech support a potentially life-threatening career. The legend emerged in the early 2000s, during the Wild West days of internet pop-ups when clicking the wrong link could install 17 different toolbars and turn your computer into a digital paperweight. But this wasn't about annoying advertisements or identity theft. This was about something far worse. The Red Room pop-up appears randomly on computers, usually late at night when users are alone and vulnerable. It asks a simple question: "Do you like the Red Room?" But unlike normal pop-ups, this one can't be closed, minimized, or ignored. Trying to shut down the computer does nothing. The pop-up persists through restarts, system crashes, even complete power failures. It's like a digital parasite that's infected your machine at the most fundamental level. Some versions describe the pop-up gradually taking over the entire screen, the red text growing larger and more insistent. Others claim it begins playing sounds, children's voices screaming, or the wet sounds of something unpleasant happening to human bodies. But here's where it gets properly terrifying. People who encounter the Red Room pop-up start dying. Not immediately, that would be too obvious. Instead, they suffer mysterious accidents over the following weeks. Car crashes where the brakes mysteriously failed, falls down stairs that should have been perfectly safe. Kitchen accidents involving knives that somehow ended up in places knives shouldn't be. The deaths follow a pattern that's too consistent to be coincidental, but too subtle for authorities to investigate. It's like the universe itself has developed a grudge against people who've seen the Red Room. The most detailed account comes from a Japanese university student who documented his experience on an internet forum before his death. He described the pop-up appearing while he was writing his thesis, persisting through multiple restart attempts, and eventually beginning to bleed red pixels across his screen. The red pixels formed shapes, rooms, he claimed, filled with what looked like furniture made from human bones. As he watched, horrified, the rooms began filling with red liquid that he realized was blood, and in that blood, he could see faces, screaming faces. He tried to document everything with screenshots, but the images never captured what he was seeing. To outside observers, his screen appeared completely normal. The Red Room was visible only to him, a private hell delivered through fiber optic cables. 3 days later, he was found dead in his dorm room. Officially, it was a gas leak. Unofficially, his friends noted that he'd been found sitting at his computer, staring at a screen that showed nothing but his normal desktop. No pop-ups, no red rooms, just a peaceful wallpaper image of a mountain landscape. The curse has evolved with technology. Early versions were limited to desktop computers, but modern reports describe the Red Room appearing on smartphones, tablets, even smart TVs. It's adapted to every screen humans stare at, because apparently supernatural entities keep up with consumer electronics trends. Some techno-occultists theorize that the Red Room exists in the spaces between digital reality, in corrupted data, buffer overflows, and the mathematical errors that computers make when processing the impossible. It's a digital haunting that uses our own technology against us. Others suggest it's a form of technomancy, magic that's evolved to work through electronic systems. The Red Room might be a traditional curse that's learned to travel through internet connections, infecting computers like a supernatural virus. The most paranoid interpretations claim the Red Room is deliberately created, that someone somewhere is using occult methods to target specific individuals through their devices. It's assassination by algorithm, murder through malware. What makes the Red Room particularly insidious is its subtlety. Unlike traditional ghosts that rattle chains or slam doors, it uses the gentle ping of a notification, the familiar interface of a pop-up window. It turns the tools of modern life into weapons. The child's voice asking, "Do you like the Red Room?" is especially twisted. Children's voices should represent innocence and curiosity. Instead, this one carries the weight of every horror movie ever made, filtered through your computer speakers at 3 a.m. when you're alone and vulnerable. Tech support forums have developed unofficial protocols for Red Room encounters. Never click anything in the pop-up. Don't try to close it normally. Instead, physically disconnect the computer from the internet and perform a complete system wipe. Some recommend burning sage around the computer, which seems like overkill until you realize people are literally dying. The most hardcore protection involves keeping older, non-internet connected devices for emergencies. If your main computer gets infected with the Red Room, you need a way to call for help that doesn't involve looking at another screen. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect is the question itself. Do you like the Red Room? It's not threatening. It's not demanding. It's just curious. Like something alien trying to understand human preferences while slowly killing you. The Red Room represents every fear about technology run amok. Our devices know everything about us. Our habits, our fears, our vulnerabilities. The curse suggests that this knowledge can be weaponized in ways that make traditional haunting look quaint by comparison. It's also uniquely modern in its isolation. Traditional ghost stories happen in shared spaces where others might witness supernatural events. The Red Room happens on personal devices, creating experiences that can't be verified or shared. You're alone with your horror, trapped behind a screen that no one else can see. The legend continues to evolve as new technologies emerge. Virtual reality headsets that trap users in red rooms they can't escape. Smart home devices that begin asking the fatal question through kitchen appliances. Augmented reality apps that overlay red rooms onto real-world locations. But the original remains the most effective. A simple pop-up that appears when you're tired, alone, and vulnerable, asking an innocent question that somehow carries the weight of your impending doom. Speaking of impending doom with an animal twist, let's meet the creatures that prove evolution has a seriously twisted sense of humor, and that some things really shouldn't have human faces. Part 8. Jin Menken Human-Faced Dog. You're walking home from the convenience store at 2 a.m., carrying a bag of instant ramen and regrets about your life choices. The streets are empty except for the occasional taxi and the distant hum of vending machines, dispensing questionable drinks to insomniacs. That's when you see the dog. It's sitting under a streetlight, perfectly still, watching you approach. Nothing unusual about that. Tokyo is full of strays, and this one looks relatively well fed. Medium-sized brown and white fur, the kind of mutt that would be adorable in daylight. but something feels wrong. As you get closer, you realize what's bothering you. The dog isn't moving like a dog. It's sitting too upright, too human-like, with its front paws positioned like hands resting on its knees. You slow down, and that's when it turns to look at you directly. The face isn't a dog's face. It's human, completely, undeniably human. A middle-aged man's face, complete with 5 o'clock shadow and tired eyes, attached to a dog's body like some twisted cartoon character, brought to horrifying life. The worst part? It speaks. "Excuse me," it says, in a perfectly normal human voice, polite and slightly apologetic. "Do you have the time?" You drop your convenient store bag. The instant ramen spills across the pavement, but you barely notice because you're staring at a dog with a human face that's just asked you for the time, like this is a perfectly normal social interaction. Meet the Jin Menken, Japan's contribution to the things that absolutely shouldn't exist but apparently do anyway. These are dogs with human faces, and they're exactly as disturbing as that description suggests. They roam the streets at night, particularly in urban areas, looking like regular dogs from behind but revealing their horrible secret when they turn around. The faces are always human, but never quite right. Sometimes they're too old for the dog's body, like elderly people's faces grafted onto puppies. Other times they're the wrong gender, a clearly feminine face on an obviously male dog body, or vice versa. Occasionally, witnesses report faces that look familiar, like people they knew who died recently. But here's what makes Jin Menken particularly unsettling. They talk, not barking that sounds like human speech, not growling that your imagination interprets as words. They speak perfect Japanese, often asking for directions, the time, or making small talk about the weather. They're polite, conversational, and absolutely terrifying. Most encounters follow a similar pattern. A lone pedestrian spots what appears to be a normal dog. As they approach, the dog turns, revealing its human face. It says something mundane and social, like asking for directions or commenting on the late hour. The witness usually runs away screaming, leaving the Jin Menken sitting calmly under its streetlight. Some brave souls have attempted conversations with these creatures. The results are uniformly disturbing. The dogs speak like humans but think like animals. They might ask for directions to places that don't exist, or comment on smells that humans can't detect. Their conversation is technically coherent but fundamentally alien. The phenomenon reportedly began appearing in the 1990s, coinciding with Japan's economic recession and increasing urbanization. Some interpret Jin Menken as symbols of dehumanization, people so ground down by modern life that they're becoming literally less human. Others suggest they're the spirits of people who lived dog-like existences, homeless individuals, workaholics who lived only to serve others, or people so isolated that they forgot how to be human. Death transformed them into something that reflects their lived experience. The most disturbing accounts come from witnesses who recognize the faces. A woman reported seeing her deceased father's face on a stray dog outside her apartment building. A businessman claimed to encounter his former colleague who had committed suicide the previous year, asking for directions to their old office building. These personal encounters suggest that Jin Menken might be more than random supernatural phenomena. They could be specific manifestations of people who've lost their humanity, either literally through death or metaphorically through modern urban life. The dogs themselves seem harmless enough. They don't attack, don't chase people, don't even seem particularly interested in typical dog behaviors like eating or playing. They just exist, sitting under streetlights, asking polite questions of strangers who are too horrified to respond appropriately. But their harmlessness makes them worse somehow. At least a monster that attacks you is playing by recognizable rules. Jin Menken break reality by being simultaneously ordinary and impossible, friendly and terrifying, familiar and utterly alien. Modern sightings have adapted to contemporary urban environments. Witnesses report seeing human-faced dogs near convenience stores, train stations, and internet cafes. They've been spotted in parking garages, outside office buildings, and in the kinds of anonymous urban spaces where modern life happens. Some accounts describe entire packs of Jinmenken gathering in abandoned lots or empty parks after midnight. They sit in circles like they're having meetings, their human faces grave and serious as they discuss matters in voices too quiet for human observers to overhear. The internet has made sharing Jinmenken encounters easier, leading to a database of sightings that reveals disturbing patterns. They appear more frequently during economic downturns, in areas with high suicide rates, and near places where homeless people gather. It's like they're drawn to human misery and desperation. Photography of Jinmenken invariably fails. Digital cameras malfunction, film comes out blurred, and smartphone videos show only normal dogs or nothing at all. The creatures seem to exist in the spaces between perception and reality, visible to human eyes but invisible to recording devices. This has led to accusations that Jinmenken witnesses are suffering from stress-induced hallucinations or psychological breaks brought on by urban isolation. But the consistency of descriptions across unconnected witnesses suggests something more substantial than mass hysteria. The talking aspect is what elevates Jinmenken from mere visual hallucination to genuine supernatural encounter. Hallucinations might explain seeing human faces on dogs, but they don't typically involve extended conversations about mundane topics. Some urban explorers have made Jinmenken hunting their hobby, patrolling late-night streets with cameras and recording equipment. None have successfully documented an encounter, but several have reported feeling watched, hearing human voices from empty alleyways, and experiencing the uncanny sensation that ordinary dogs were about to speak to them. The legend has spawned protection rituals and avoidance strategies. Don't make eye contact with unknown dogs after midnight. If a dog asks you a question, don't answer. Just keep walking. Carry dog treats. Not because they'll help, but because the act of offering them to a Jinmenken supposedly reveals their true nature immediately. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Jinmenken is what they represent. The fear that humanity itself is disposable, that we can lose what makes us human so gradually that we don't notice until it's too late. They're walking reminders that the line between human and animal might be thinner than we'd like to believe. And in a society increasingly obsessed with efficiency, productivity, and treating people like resources, maybe Jinmenken aren't supernatural at all. Maybe they're just the logical endpoint of dehumanization, made visible under streetlights in the small hours when the masks of civilization slip. Speaking of masks slipping, and things that shouldn't grow but absolutely refuse to follow the laws of biology, let's meet the doll that's turned hair growth into everyone's worst nightmare. Part 9. Okiku Doll. You're browsing through a traditional temple gift shop in northern Japan, killing time while your tour group examines ancient artifacts that look suspiciously like every other ancient artifact you've seen this week. That's when you spot her in the corner. A traditional Japanese doll, about the size of a small child, sitting in a place of honor behind glass. She's wearing a beautiful red kimono, her porcelain face painted in the classical style with black hair cut in a perfect bob that frames her delicate features. The placard next to her reads Okiku in both Japanese and English. Below that, in smaller text, hair grows continuously despite regular trimming, donated to temple in 1938. Handle with respect. Hair grows continuously. You lean closer to examine the doll's face. Her hair does look remarkably real, silky black strands that catch the light beautifully. It's cut in a neat bob that ends just below her ears. "Excuse me," you ask the elderly priest tending the shop. "What does it mean that her hair grows?" He looks up from his book and follows your gaze to the doll. His expression becomes serious. Okiku-shen's hair grows naturally, like a living person's. We trim it regularly, but it always returns, sometimes longer than before. That's impossible. The priest shrugs. Many things are impossible until they happen. Would you like to hear her story? You nod, and he sets down his book. She was a gift from a brother to his little sister in 1918. The sister, also named Okiku, died shortly after receiving the doll. The family noticed that the doll's hair began growing, just as their daughters would have. They believed their child's spirit had entered her favorite toy. You stare at the doll's serene face, and it's been growing ever since. For over a century, we have photographs documenting the changes. Sometimes the hair grows quickly, sometimes slowly, but it never stops. Meet the Okiku doll, the supernatural toy that's turned hair growth into a century-long horror story and made barbers across Japan very nervous about their client base. The doll sits in Manenji Temple in Hokkaido, where she's become both a religious artifact and a tourist attraction. She's a traditional Okiku Ningyu, the type of doll given to young girls in early 20th century Japan. What makes her special is her refusal to follow the basic laws of biology that should prevent inanimate objects from growing human hair. The original story is heartbreakingly simple. In 1918, 17-year-old Aikichi Suzuki bought the doll as a gift for his 2-year-old sister, Okiku. The little girl loved the doll, carrying it everywhere and treating it like a living companion. But within a year, Okiku fell ill and died, clutching her beloved doll. The grieving family kept the doll as a memento of their lost daughter. That's when they noticed something impossible. The doll's hair was growing. Initially, the hair had been cut in a neat bob, typical of the period. But over the following months, it began extending past the doll's shoulders. The family would trim it back to its original length, only to find it had grown again within weeks. As the hair continued growing, the family became convinced that their daughter's spirit had taken residence in her favorite toy. They cared for the doll as if it were alive, speaking to it, offering it food and treating it with the reverence due to a family member. In 1938, the family donated the doll to Manenji Temple, where Buddhist priests could properly care for what they believed was their daughter's spiritual vessel. The priests accepted the responsibility, and Okiku has lived at the temple ever since. The temple maintains detailed records of the doll's hair growth, including photographs spanning decades. The hair grows at different rates, sometimes rapidly, sometimes barely perceptibly, but it never stops entirely. Laboratory analysis has confirmed that it's genuine human hair, not synthetic fibers or animal fur. What makes this particularly unsettling is the hair's behavior. It doesn't grow uniformly like living hair would. Sometimes it grows longer on one side than the other. Occasionally, it changes texture or color slightly. A few times, witnesses have reported finding the hair styled differently in the morning than it was the night before, as if someone had been brushing it. The priests treat Okiku with the care due to a living person. They speak to her daily, offer her prayers, and maintain her appearance. They trim her hair regularly, but always with ceremony and apology, as if they're giving a child a haircut rather than maintaining an object. Visitors often report feeling watched while examining the doll. Her painted eyes seem to track movement, and some claim to have seen her facial expression change subtly. Photography is permitted, but many digital cameras malfunction in her presence, producing blurred images or strange light artifacts. Scientific examination has failed to explain the phenomenon. The hair follicles in the doll's scalp show no signs of biological activity. There's no mechanism that could produce hair growth, no cells that could divide and create new material. Yet the hair continues growing, apparently drawing nutrients from nowhere and following growth patterns that shouldn't exist. Skeptics have proposed various explanations. Perhaps the original hair was much longer than it appeared, coiled inside the doll's head, and slowly working its way out through temperature changes or vibration. Maybe successive generations of priests have been secretly adding hair to maintain the legend and attract pilgrims. But these explanations don't account for the consistency of the phenomenon across multiple generations of caretakers, the documented evidence spanning a century, or the laboratory analysis confirming the hair's properties. The more disturbing possibility is that the doll represents something science doesn't yet understand about consciousness, death, and the objects that connect us to lost loved ones. Maybe intense emotional attachment can create supernatural bonds that transcend biological death. Or maybe some spirits really do inhabit the toys they loved in life, finding comfort in familiar forms while slowly, inexorably growing back the hair that death stole from them. The temple receives thousands of visitors annually, many of whom come specifically to see Okiku. Parents bring children to witness the impossible. Pilgrims pray for deceased family members, and researchers attempt to document phenomena that shouldn't exist. But perhaps the most frequent visitors are people who've lost children. They come to see proof that love transcends death, that the bonds between family members can persist beyond biological existence. For them, Okiku represents hope that their own lost children might have found peace in familiar objects. The doll's care has become a family tradition among the temple priests. Each generation learns the rituals of maintenance, the prayers that keep her content, and the respect due to a child who chose to remain close to the living world. Her hair currently reaches past her shoulders, longer than it's been in decades. The priests aren't sure why it's been growing more rapidly recently, but they continue their careful trimming and documentation, maintaining records that will outlive them all. Okiku sits peacefully in her glass case, her black hair gleaming under the temple lights, growing at whatever pace pleases her supernatural spirit. She's proof that some stories are too strange to be fiction and too persistent to be dismissed. And somewhere in her painted eyes is the eternal contentment of a 2-year-old girl who found a way to keep her favorite toy forever. Speaking of keeping things forever in spaces that trap people longer than they should, let's visit the tunnel where time itself seems to have broken down, and driving through it might be the last journey you ever make. Part 10. Kiyotaki Tunnel. You're driving back to Kyoto after a weekend trip to the mountains, taking the scenic route because you've got time to kill, and the main highway is clogged with traffic. Your GPS suggests a shortcut through the Kiyotaki area, a narrow road that winds through dense forest toward the city. The tunnel appears suddenly through the trees, its entrance yawning like a concrete mouth. It's older than the modern highways, built in a different era when engineers were less concerned with aesthetics and more focused on simply punching holes through mountains. You slow down as you approach. Something about the tunnel feels wrong, though you can't put your finger on what. Maybe it's the way the darkness inside seems absolute, impenetrable even with your headlights. Maybe it's how quiet everything becomes as you near the entrance. You check your watch, 11:47 p.m. The tunnel is exactly as long as it should be, 444 meters, according to the sign, a perfectly normal length for a mountain tunnel. You enter at normal speed, your headlights carving a cone of visibility through the darkness ahead. But something's not right. You've been driving for what feels like several minutes, but the tunnel isn't ending. The walls continue past your windows in an endless concrete repetition. You check your speedometer. You're maintaining 40 kilometers per hour. At this speed, you should have exited the tunnel minutes ago. You glance at your watch again, 11:47 p.m. That's impossible. You've been driving for at least 5 minutes, but your watch shows the exact same time you entered. You tap the crystal, wondering if it's stopped, but the second hand is moving normally. That's when you see the figure in your rearview mirror. Someone is standing in the tunnel behind you, perfectly still in the center of the road. You slam on the brakes and look back, but there's nothing there except empty tunnels stretching into darkness. When you turn forward again, there's something written on the tunnel wall in what looks like fresh blood. Count the mirrors. Meet Kiyotaki Tunnel, where the laws of physics take a coffee break and time becomes more of a suggestion than a rule. This 444-meter tunnel in Kyoto has been accumulating ghost stories faster than it accumulates traffic violations. Built in 1927 to connect remote mountain communities, it's become infamous for supernatural encounters that range from mildly unsettling to I'm never driving again in my life. The tunnel's reputation began with construction workers reporting strange accidents during its building. Tools would disappear, only to reappear in impossible locations. Workers claimed to hear voices calling from within the mountain, and several reported seeing figures in the tunnel after dark that vanished when approached. But the real horror began after the tunnel opened to traffic. Drivers report entering at one time and exiting at the same time, despite spending what feels like hours inside. Others describe the tunnel extending far beyond its actual length, stretching endlessly through the mountain like a concrete purgatory. The mirrors are the tunnel's signature supernatural feature. There should be exactly 14 mirrors mounted on the walls for safety purposes, but drivers who count them report finding different numbers: 16, 18, sometimes as many as 25. Count them again on the return trip, and the number changes. Some drivers have made the mistake of stopping to examine the extra mirrors. They report reflections that don't match reality, passengers who aren't in the car, figures standing behind the vehicle, or worst of all, reflections of themselves that move independently. The tunnel has a particular fondness for trapping people who enter with negative intentions. Couples planning to break up often find themselves driving in circles for hours. People fleeing from problems report endless loops through the tunnel while their gas gauge never moves. But it's not just about psychological states. The tunnel seems to have its own agenda. One of the most documented cases involves a businessman who entered the tunnel at 11:30 p.m. and emerged to find it was 6 a.m. despite his car's clock showing only minutes had passed. His fuel gauge hadn't moved, but he'd somehow driven for over 6 hours. Security cameras at both ends of the tunnel showed his car entering and exiting within normal time frames. The temperature inside the tunnel reportedly fluctuates wildly, regardless of outside weather. Drivers have entered during summer heat waves, only to need their heaters halfway through. Others have driven through during winter snowstorms and found themselves sweating from inexplicable warmth. Electronics behave strangely inside the tunnel. GPS devices lose signal and display impossible locations. Radio stations play music from decades past, sometimes including songs that never existed. Mobile phones receive calls from numbers that were disconnected years ago. The most disturbing reports come from drivers who encounter other vehicles inside the tunnel that shouldn't exist. Classic cars from the 1950s driving alongside modern vehicles. Military trucks from World War II. Vehicles that appear solid and real until the observer tries to follow them outside, where they simply vanish. Some witnesses describe seeing the same car repeatedly during a single transit through the tunnel, as if they're looping through the same section of road. The other vehicle's occupants never respond to honking or flashing lights, staring straight ahead like they're following a route only they can see. The tunnel's construction history adds another layer of unease. It was built through a mountain that locals considered sacred, home to various shrines and burial sites. Construction required destroying several small temples and relocating graves that had stood undisturbed for centuries. Local folklore claims the mountain was a gateway between worlds, a thin place where the supernatural could bleed through into physical reality. Building a tunnel might have weakened whatever barriers kept those other worlds separate. Modern paranormal investigators have attempted to study the tunnel using scientific equipment. Their results are consistently inconsistent. Electromagnetic readings spike at random intervals. Temperature sensors record impossible fluctuations. Audio equipment picks up voices speaking languages that don't exist. Video footage invariably shows discrepancies between what cameras record and what human observers witness. The camera might show an empty tunnel while the person holding it sees figures lining the walls, or the camera captures images of things the observer never noticed. Symbols carved into walls, shadows that move independently, reflections in mirrors that show different scenes entirely. The tunnel has developed its own urban legend subculture. Ghost hunters make pilgrimages to experience its anomalies firsthand. Online forums trade theories about the source of its supernatural properties. Some claim it's a natural phenomenon caused by magnetic fields or underground gases. Others insist it's genuinely haunted by the spirits displaced during construction. Local authorities have installed additional lighting and safety equipment, but these improvements seem to have no effect on the supernatural encounters. If anything, the better lighting makes the anomalies more visible and more disturbing. The tunnel's reputation has reached international paranormal communities. It's been featured in documentaries, investigated by teams of researchers, and become a destination for supernatural tourism, but increased attention hasn't diminished its otherworldly properties. What makes Kiyotaki Tunnel particularly unsettling is its normalcy during daylight hours with regular traffic. It functions as an ordinary tunnel. Commuters pass through without incident. Delivery trucks make their routes. Everything appears completely normal. But at night, or when you're alone, or when you're carrying emotional baggage that might resonate with whatever forces inhabit the tunnel, all bets are off. The tunnel doesn't just haunt, it judges. It seems to respond to the psychological state of its travelers, amplifying fears, extending journeys for those who need time to think, and trapping people who are trying to escape from problems that can't be outrun. Maybe that's the real horror of Kiyotaki Tunnel. It's a mirror that reflects not just your physical appearance, but your spiritual condition, and some reflections are too disturbing to bear. Speaking of reflections and romantic entanglements that end badly, let's paddle over to the Tokyo Park where love literally dies, and taking a boat ride with your significant other is basically signing your relationship's death warrant. Part 11. Inokashira Park Boat Curse. You've been dating Yuki for 8 months, and things are getting serious. Serious enough that you're considering popping the question. She's everything you've ever wanted. Intelligent, funny, beautiful, and miraculously willing to tolerate your terrible jokes about anime. For your anniversary, you decide to take her somewhere romantic. Inokashira Park in Tokyo seems perfect. Cherry blossoms, peaceful pond, and those cute rental boats you've seen in movies. Nothing says I love you like gently paddling around a scenic lake while feeding ducks and talking about your future together. Let's rent a boat, Yuki suggests, pointing to the rental station. It looks so romantic. You should have done your research. You should have asked literally anyone about the park's reputation. You should have noticed how the boat rental attendant's smile faltered when he saw you were a couple. You should have wondered why several other romantic pairs were arguing loudly near the water's edge. But you're in love, and love makes people spectacularly stupid. You rent a swan-shaped pedal boat, because apparently you're determined to make this as cliché as possible, and paddle out onto the tranquil water. The afternoon sun sparkles on the pond's surface. Couples stroll along the banks. Children feed ducks. Everything is perfect. That's when Yuki says, "We need to talk." Those 4 words that have ended more relationships than infidelity, incompatibility, and bad hygiene combined. Your stomach drops as you realize you're trapped on a boat in the middle of a pond with someone who's about to ruin your life. "I've been thinking," she continues, not meeting your eyes. "Maybe we're moving too fast." Meet Inokashira Park, Tokyo's most beautiful relationship graveyard, where love goes to die in swan-shaped boats. The curse is devastatingly simple. Couples who ride boats together on Inokashira Pond are doomed to break up. Not eventually, not probably. They're doomed. It's like a supernatural divorce lawyer lurking beneath the tranquil waters, just waiting to file the paperwork. The legend centers around Benzaiten, the goddess of love, art, and music, who has a shrine on an island in the pond. Sounds romantic, right? A goddess of love overseeing couples enjoying peaceful boat rides. Wrong. Benzaiten is also notoriously jealous. She can't stand seeing couples happy together, especially on her sacred pond, so she sabotages their relationships with the efficiency of a celestial homewrecker. Some say she whispers doubts into lovers' ears. Others claim she amplifies existing relationship problems. A few suggest she simply enjoys chaos and views couple destruction as entertainment. The curse has been documented for decades. Relationship counselors in Tokyo report a suspicious number of clients whose problems began during or immediately after boat rides in Inokashira Park. Wedding planners have learned to ask couples about their park history before finalizing arrangements. The breakups follow predictable patterns. Arguments begin during the boat ride itself, often about topics that seem trivial before stepping aboard. One partner suddenly finds the other's laugh annoying. Someone mentions an ex inappropriately. Critical personality flaws become glaringly obvious while trapped together on a small boat. But the curse doesn't stop with immediate arguments. Couples who manage to complete their boat ride without fighting often break up within days or weeks. The boat ride seems to plant seeds of doubt that grow into relationship-ending problems. Some victims report feeling an overwhelming sense of claustrophobia while on the water, not because of the boat's size, but because of their partner's presence. Others describe sudden clarity about their relationship's flaws, as if someone had handed them a detailed list of everything wrong with their significant other. The most disturbing accounts come from couples who were genuinely happy before their boat ride. Long-term relationships that had survived every test life could throw at them suddenly crumble after 20 minutes of pedaling around a pond. One particularly tragic case involved a couple who had been married for 5 years and decided to recreate their first date at the park. They rented the same type of boat, sat in the same spots, even brought the same snacks. Halfway across the pond, the husband announced he wanted a divorce. No explanation, no fight, no warning. He simply couldn't stand being married anymore. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Local residents have known about the curse for generations, but tourists and young couples continue falling victim to it. The boat rental operators have considered posting warning signs, but nobody wants to be responsible for advertising supernatural relationship destruction. Some enterprising individuals have attempted to profit from the curse. Divorce lawyers have been spotted near the boat rental station, discreetly handing out business cards to arguing couples. Private investigators use the park as a testing ground, bringing suspicious clients there to observe their partner's behavior under supernatural pressure. The curse seems particularly effective on new relationships that haven't established strong foundations. Couples who have been together less than a year have the highest breakup rate. But even long-term relationships aren't immune. The curse just takes longer to work its destruction. Various protection rituals have developed around the legend. Some couples visit Benzaiten's shrine before renting boats, offering prayers and gifts to appease the jealous goddess. Others wear matching charms or carry specific items believed to ward off relationship curses. But the most effective protection appears to be simple avoidance. Couples who want their relationships to survive don't rent boats at Inokashira Park. It's become an unspoken rule among Tokyo's romantically savvy, beautiful pond, great for individual visits, absolutely lethal for dating couples. The curse has evolved with modern relationship dynamics. Social media has amplified its effects. Couples who fight during boat rides often air their grievances online, turning private relationship problems into public humiliation. Dating apps have made it easier to find replacement partners immediately after curse-induced breakups. Some skeptics argue that the curse is actually a form of relationship stress test. Being trapped on a small boat forces couples to confront compatibility issues they might otherwise ignore. The pond doesn't create problems, it reveals existing ones. But this explanation doesn't account for couples who were genuinely happy and compatible before their boat ride, only to develop irreconcilable differences afterward. Something supernatural is definitely happening on that water. The boats themselves might be part of the mechanism. These aren't romantic gondolas. They're awkward pedal boats that require coordination and cooperation. Couples who can't synchronize their pedaling quickly become frustrated with each other. Add supernatural intervention, and minor irritation becomes relationship-ending hatred. The swan design adds insult to injury. Swans mate for life, making them symbols of eternal love. Having your relationship destroyed while riding in a swan-shaped boat is like being dumped at your own wedding. The irony makes it worse. Inokashira Park remains popular despite its reputation. The curse has become part of its charm for some visitors, who come specifically to witness relationship destruction. Others view it as a challenge, believing their love is strong enough to survive Benzaiten's jealousy. They're usually wrong. Your boat ride with Yuki ended with both of you in tears, paddling back to shore in hostile silence. The breakup was finalized before you returned the boat keys. 8 months of happiness destroyed in 20 minutes on a cursed pond. But at least you learned something valuable. Next time you want to impress someone you love, maybe stick to dinner and a movie. Some romantic gestures aren't worth the supernatural risk. Speaking of supernatural risks and faces that shouldn't be blank but somehow are, let's meet the spirits who've mastered the art of looking completely normal until they turn around and reveal they've forgotten something rather important. Part 12. Faceless Ghosts. You're walking home alone through the narrow streets of old Tokyo, taking a shortcut through neighborhoods that still look like they belong in the Edo period. Paper lanterns cast dancing shadows on ancient wooden buildings, and the modern city feels like a distant memory. A woman walks towards you on the opposite side of the street. Nothing unusual about that. Even in these traditional areas, people live normal lives. She's dressed in a simple kimono, her long black hair neatly arranged. She seems to be heading home from some evening appointment, walking with the unhurried pace of someone familiar with these winding streets. You glance at her casually as she passes under a street lamp. She's quite pretty. Classical Japanese features, pale skin, elegant posture. She notices your glance and smiles politely, the kind of acknowledging nod that strangers exchange in quiet neighborhoods. That's when she stops walking. She turns to face you directly, still smiling, but something's wrong with her expression. It's too fixed, too unchanging. You slow down, trying to figure out what's bothering you about her appearance. She tilts her head slightly, still maintaining that perfect smile. Then she raises her hand and runs it down her face in a slow, deliberate gesture. As her hand passes over her features, they disappear. First her eyes vanish, leaving smooth skin where they should be. Then her nose dissolves into nothingness. Finally, her mouth fades away, taking that polite smile with it. Where her face should be, there's only blank flesh, smooth, featureless skin stretched over the shape of a skull. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just emptiness where a human face should exist. She stands there for a moment, letting you fully comprehend what you're seeing. Then she turns and walks away, moving with the same unhurried pace as before, as if removing her face was a perfectly normal end to a pleasant evening encounter. Meet the Nopera Brew, Japan's faceless spirits who have perfected the art of looking completely normal until they decide to ruin your entire week by revealing they've forgotten something rather important about human anatomy. These are shape-shifting spirits that appear as ordinary people going about their daily business. They can mimic any human appearance perfectly. The businessman catching a late train, the elderly woman walking her dog, the student hurrying to class. They're so convincing that you might have conversations with them without realizing anything's amiss, until they decide to show you their true nature. The face removal is their signature move. Some do it dramatically, wiping away their features like erasing a blackboard. Others prefer a more gradual approach, letting their features fade slowly while maintaining eye contact. A few particularly theatrical specimens enjoy removing specific features one at a time, building suspense before the full reveal. What makes Nopera Blue particularly unsettling is their timing. They don't reveal themselves randomly. They wait for the perfect moment of human vulnerability. When you're alone, tired, or emotionally fragile. When you've just relaxed and assumed you're safe. When you most need human connection, they show you exactly how inhuman they really are. They seem to feed on shock and fear, but not in the aggressive way of other supernatural predators. They're more like cosmic pranksters with a deeply twisted sense of humor. They don't want to harm you physically. They just want to leave you questioning the reality of every human interaction for the rest of your life. The encounters follow predictable patterns. The spirit appears as a helpful stranger offering directions, assistance, or simple human acknowledgement. They engage in perfectly normal social interaction, often for several minutes. Just when you've relaxed and accepted them as genuinely human, they reveal their true nature. Some victims report having entire conversations with Nopera Ball before the revelation. The spirits can discuss current events, give accurate directions, and respond appropriately to questions. They're not mindless illusions. They're intelligent entities that understand human behavior well enough to mimic it perfectly. But their knowledge has limits. Ask them about personal details or specific recent events, and their responses become vague or contradictory. They can imitate humanity, but but they can't truly understand it. They're like sophisticated chatbots with supernatural powers and a nasty sense of humor. The faceless appearance varies between encounters. Some describe smooth, blank skin like an unfinished mannequin. Others report faces that look like they're covered in flesh-colored fabric. A few witnesses claim the faces appear normal from a distance, but reveal their lack of features only when examined closely. What's particularly disturbing is how they maintain their human mannerisms even after revealing their true nature. They continue walking with normal human gait, maintain appropriate posture, and react to their environment as if they could still see and hear normally. How they navigate without sensory organs is a mystery that makes the encounters even more unnerving. Nopperabun reported throughout Japanese history, but they've adapted to modern environments with remarkable ease. Contemporary sightings include office workers in business districts, shoppers in malls, and passengers on trains. They've learned to blend into urban environments as effectively as they once fit into rural settings. Some modern encounters involve technology in disturbing ways. Witnesses report taking photos of helpful strangers, only to discover later that the images show faceless figures. Others describe video calls, where the person on the other end gradually loses their features during the conversation. The spirits seem particularly drawn to moments of human kindness or connection. They appear as people needing help, accepting assistance, then revealing their true nature once the good deed is done. It's like they're testing human compassion and punishing it with existential horror. This has created a cruel paradox for their victims. The experience makes people hesitant to help strangers or engage in casual social interaction. The spirits have weaponized human decency, turning kindness into a potential source of trauma. Some scholars interpret Nopperabun as manifestations of social anxiety, the fear that other people aren't really human, that social interaction is just elaborate performance hiding something alien underneath. In a society that values social harmony and proper behavior, they represent the nightmare that everyone is just pretending to be normal. Others suggest they're warnings about the dehumanizing effects of modern life, as people become more isolated and interactions become more superficial. Perhaps we really are losing our faces, our individual humanity, becoming faceless drones going through the motions of human society. The spirits don't seem interested in causing physical harm. They don't chase their victims or continue harassing them after the initial encounter. They simply want to be seen, to share their faceless existence with someone who can appreciate the full horror of their condition. But the psychological impact lasts far longer than the encounter itself. Victims report becoming hyper-vigilant about facial features, constantly checking that people they interact with have all the standard components. Some develop prosopagnosia-like symptoms, becoming unable to recognize familiar faces or trust their perception of human features. The most disturbing reports come from people who claim to see Nopperabun everywhere after their first encounter. Once you know they exist, every stranger becomes suspect. That helpful person giving directions, that friendly cashier, that passenger sitting across from you on the train, any of them could be wearing a borrowed face, waiting for the right moment to reveal the emptiness beneath. Modern urban legends have evolved the Nopperabun concept for digital age anxieties. Stories of video chat participants whose faces gradually pixelate away, social media profiles where the photos slowly lose facial features, and deepfake technology being used by faceless spirits to create more convincing human disguises. But the traditional encounter remains the most effective. A moment of normal human interaction suddenly revealed as performance by something that understands the mechanics of humanity without possessing its essence. They're reminders that the face, the thing we use to recognize and connect with each other, might be more fragile than we realize. They've made the simple act of looking at another person into a potential source of existential dread. And somewhere in Tokyo tonight, a faceless spirit is putting on someone else's features, preparing for another encounter with an unsuspecting human who just wants to get home safely. Speaking of getting home safely and high-speed encounters with things that shouldn't exist, let's hit the road with a motorcyclist who's taken losing your head to absolutely literal extremes. Part 13. The Headless Rider. You're driving home late from work, taking the highway that cuts through the mountains outside Tokyo. It's past midnight, and the road is empty except for the occasional truck hauling cargo to early morning deliveries. Your headlights carve a tunnel through the darkness as you navigate the winding curves. That's when you see the motorcycle in your rearview mirror. It's moving fast, much faster than the speed limit allows, and gaining on you rapidly. The headlight is bright, almost blinding in your mirrors. You curse under your breath and move to the right lane, expecting the rider to pass you like every other speed demon on these mountain roads. But as the motorcycle pulls alongside your car, you glance over to see who's in such a hurry. The rider is wearing a black leather jacket and dark helmet. Nothing unusual about that. Motorcyclists prefer protective gear, especially on these dangerous mountain curves. But something's wrong with the proportions. The helmet seems to be sitting directly on the rider's shoulders. You look more carefully and realize the horrible truth. There's no head underneath that helmet, no neck connecting it to the body. The helmet is empty, somehow balanced on shoulders that shouldn't be able to support it, let alone control a motorcycle at high speed. The headless rider turns toward your car, though how he can see you without eyes is a mystery, and revs his engine. The sound is unnaturally loud, echoing off the mountain walls like thunder. Then he accelerates past you, his taillight disappearing into the darkness ahead. You slow down, hands shaking on the steering wheel, wondering if exhaustion is making you hallucinate. But as you round the next curve, you see skid marks on the asphalt, fresh and dark, and hanging from a tree branch at the edge of the road is something that makes your blood freeze. A wire, nearly invisible in the darkness, stretched across the road at exactly the height to catch someone's neck. Meet the headless rider, the motorcyclist who's turned decapitation into a career and made late-night highway driving significantly more terrifying than it already was. The legend began in the 1980s, during Japan's motorcycle boom when young people embraced two-wheeled freedom and mountain roads became popular for high-speed riding. That's when the accidents started. Riders found decapitated on remote highways, their heads severed so cleanly that police suspected deliberate traps rather than crashes. The wire was the weapon of choice, nearly invisible steel cables stretched across roads at neck height, positioned to catch speeding motorcyclists. Some were found tied between trees, others attached to guardrails or road signs, always at the perfect height to separate head from shoulders with surgical precision. The killings were never solved. No witnesses, no evidence beyond the wires themselves. Police suspected a serial killer targeting motorcyclists, but they could never identify a suspect or establish a pattern beyond the method of murder. Then the sightings began. Other riders reported encountering a headless motorcyclist on the same roads where the murders occurred. Always late at night, always riding at impossible speeds, always on a bike that should have crashed without a rider's head to navigate. The headless rider doesn't seem interested in conversation or interaction. He simply appears, rides alongside other motorcyclists for a few minutes, then disappears into the darkness. Some witnesses report him pointing toward areas where accidents have occurred, as if warning them about dangerous sections of road. Others describe more disturbing encounters. The headless rider following them for miles, his empty helmet somehow tracking their movements. Engine sounds that don't match his motorcycle's speed. Sudden appearances and disappearances that violate basic physics. The most unsettling reports come from riders who've seen him during the day. In bright sunlight, the illusion should be impossible to maintain, but witnesses describe the same figure: leather jacket, empty helmet, and motorcycle skills that shouldn't exist without sensory input. Some accounts suggest the headless rider is the spirit of the wire killer's first victim, doomed to ride the mountain roads eternally. Others claim he's the killer himself, transformed by his crimes into something inhuman. A few propose he's a warning system, appearing to prevent other motorcyclists from suffering his fate. But the most disturbing theory is that he's still killing. Modern motorcycle fatalities on those mountain roads often involve inexplicable circumstances. Riders found decapitated despite no visible obstacles, accident scenes where the physics don't match the damage, witnesses who report seeing a second motorcycle flee the scene, ridden by someone who shouldn't be able to see where he's going. The headless rider has become part of motorcycle culture in Japan. Riders share stories about encounters on online forums, comparing details and warning others about specific roads and times. Some carry mirrors positioned to watch for supernatural pursuers, others avoid the mountain highways entirely after dark. The legend has evolved with motorcycle technology. Early reports described him riding vintage bikes from the 1980s. Recent sightings include modern sport bikes, complete with electronic systems that shouldn't function without human input. He's apparently keeping up with automotive advances while maintaining his supernatural abilities. Some witnesses report that his motorcycle makes no sound despite visible exhaust and engine movement. Others describe engine noise that's too loud, echoing unnaturally off mountain walls. A few claim his bike leaves no tire tracks, as if it's not quite touching the road surface. The empty helmet has become the legend's signature element. Different witnesses describe various helmet styles, sometimes classic designs from the 1980s, other times modern full-face protection, but they're always empty, somehow maintaining position and orientation without a head to support them. Photography of the headless rider invariably fails. Digital cameras malfunction, film comes out blurred, and smartphone videos show only normal motorcyclists or empty roads. He exists in the spaces between perception and recording, visible to human eyes but invisible to technology. This has led to accusations that witnesses are suffering from road hypnosis, microsleep, or hallucinations brought on by night driving fatigue. But the consistency of descriptions across unconnected witnesses suggests something more substantial than mass hysteria. The wire element adds real-world danger to the supernatural legend. Police have found actual wires on mountain roads, sometimes in locations where the headless rider has been sighted. Whether these are copycat traps inspired by the legend or evidence that the original killer is still active remains unclear. Modern motorcyclists have developed protection strategies based on the legend. Ride in groups rather than alone. Avoid certain roads after midnight. Install additional mirrors to watch for supernatural pursuers. Carry wire cutters in case of trap encounters. Some riders claim to have successfully followed the headless rider, but their accounts end in confusion and contradiction. Roads that lead nowhere, GPS systems that malfunction, fuel gauges that don't change despite hours of riding. It's as if he exists in a parallel version of the highway system that doesn't quite match physical reality. The mountain roads where he appears have become pilgrimage sites for motorcycle enthusiasts and paranormal investigators. They come seeking encounters with the supernatural rider, often finding nothing more than dangerous curves and the occasional normal motorcyclist who's also looking for ghosts. But sometimes, late at night when the mountain mist rolls in and visibility drops to nearly zero, riders report seeing that familiar silhouette in their mirrors, leather jacket, empty helmet, and impossible riding skills that shouldn't exist without a head to guide them. The headless rider represents every motorcyclist's deepest fear, losing control at high speed and paying the ultimate price for their passion. He's a reminder that some roads are more dangerous than they appear, and some riders never really stop riding, even after they've lost the most essential part of their anatomy. And somewhere on those dark mountain highways, he's still out there, warning others about the wires that claimed his head, and perhaps adding to the collection with victims who don't heed his supernatural warnings. Speaking of warnings that shouldn't be ignored, and words that can kill, let's turn our attention to the poem that's supposedly so cursed it can end your life just by reading it aloud. Part 14, Tomino's Hell, Poem Curse. You're browsing through a used bookstore in Shibuya, the kind of cramped, towering establishment where books are stacked floor to ceiling, and the aisles are barely wide enough for one person. You're looking for something interesting to read on the train, maybe some classic Japanese poetry to improve your cultural knowledge. The elderly shopkeeper notices you examining the poetry section and approaches with a slim, worn volume. "Ah, you appreciate poetry," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. This collection contains some of our most powerful works, but I must warn you, he opens to a specific page and points to a poem titled Tomino's Hell. This one should only be read silently, never aloud. You laugh. What do you mean? It's just poetry. His expression becomes grave. I mean exactly what I said. Read it with your eyes, not your voice. Some words carry more power than others. You thank him and purchase the book, amused by his superstitious warning. On the train home, you flip to the poem he mentioned. It's written by Saijo Yaso, a respected poet from the early 20th century. The verses describe a young boy named Tomino falling into hell, encountering demons and experiencing various torments. It's dark, certainly, but no darker than plenty of other classical poetry. The imagery is vivid, descriptions of hellish landscapes, supernatural beings, and the boy's suffering. But it's clearly fictional, an artistic exploration of Buddhist concepts of afterlife punishment. You're curious about why the shopkeeper seems so frightened of it. Maybe reading it aloud will reveal some hidden power in the rhythm or sound that makes it particularly effective as spoken poetry. That would be your last rational thought for several minutes. Meet Tomino's Hell, the poem that's turned public reading into a potentially fatal activity and made literature professors nervous about their curriculum choices. Written by Saijo Yaso in 1919, it appears in his collection Kinishu, The Golden Berries. On the surface, it's a surreal narrative poem describing a boy named Tomino, who falls into various levels of hell, encountering demons, navigating hellish landscapes, and experiencing supernatural torments. The poem itself is genuinely unsettling. It contains vivid descriptions of infernal imagery, references to traditional Japanese concepts of hell, and a dreamlike quality that makes the reader uncertain whether the events are literal or metaphorical. But thousands of poems explore dark themes without acquiring reputations for supernatural danger. What makes Tomino's Hell different is what allegedly happens when you read it aloud. The legend claims that speaking the poem's words activates a curse that brings misfortune, illness, or death to the reader. The specific consequences vary depending on who's telling the story, but they're always severe and often fatal. Some accounts describe immediate effects, readers collapsing mid-recitation, developing sudden illnesses, or experiencing psychological breaks. Others report delayed consequences that manifest over days or weeks, accidents, disease onset, family tragedies, or mysterious deaths. The curse supposedly operates through the poem's spoken words rather than its written text. Reading silently is considered safe. It's the act of giving voice to Tomino's hellish journey that opens doorways to supernatural retribution. This has created a bizarre literary phenomenon, a famous poem that people collect, study, and share, but never read aloud. It's like owning a beautiful musical instrument that you're forbidden to play. The first documented case of the curse allegedly occurred in 1919, shortly after the poem's publication. A literature student at Tokyo University chose it for a public recitation contest. Midway through the performance, he began speaking in voices that weren't his own, childlike whispers, demonic growls, and languages that didn't exist. He completed the recitation in a trance-like state, then collapsed. 3 days later, he was found dead in his dormitory room with no apparent cause. The official verdict was heart failure, but witnesses described his final words as fragments from the poem, spoken in that same otherworldly voice. Since then, reports of Tomino incidents have accumulated steadily. A radio announcer who read the poem on air during a late-night literary program suffered a massive stroke before finishing the final stanza. A teacher who used it for a Japanese literature class experienced a series of accidents that left her permanently disabled. The pattern is always similar. The reader begins normally, then something changes in their voice, their posture, their entire presence. They become conduits for something else, something that uses their vocal cords to complete the recitation, and afterward, their lives take decidedly unfortunate turns. But here's where it gets particularly twisted. The poem seems to be addictive. People who read it silently report an overwhelming urge to speak the words aloud. The verses echo in their minds. demanding to be voiced. Some describe it as the literary equivalent of an earworm, a persistent mental loop that can only be satisfied by recitation. This has led to tragic cases of people who knew about the curse but couldn't resist the compulsion to speak the poem anyway. They understand the danger intellectually, but find themselves powerless against the word's demand for vocal expression. The poem's content might explain its alleged power. It describes Tomino's journey through increasingly horrific versions of hell, each more vivid and disturbing than the last. The imagery is so intense that some scholars suggest reading it aloud creates a form of self-hypnosis that makes readers vulnerable to psychological or supernatural influence. Others theorize that Saijo Yaso accidentally captured something genuinely supernatural in his verses. Perhaps he channeled real spiritual forces while writing, creating words that serve as incantations rather than mere poetry. The poem might be less artistic creation than accidental spell. Modern incidents have been documented with increasing frequency, possibly due to the internet's ability to spread both the poem and stories about its effects. Online forums dedicated to cursed literature share accounts of Tomino experiences, usually posted by friends or family members rather than the victims themselves. A particularly disturbing case occurred in 2019, exactly 100 years after the poem's publication. A university literature club decided to test the curse by having members read the poem aloud during a recorded session. The video was uploaded to social media before anyone realized what had happened to the readers. 3 of the 5 participants were hospitalized within a week. 2 suffered unexplained seizures, 1 developed a rare autoimmune condition, and the 4th simply vanished, last seen walking toward a forest outside the city, muttering verses from the poem. The 5th member, who had refused to participate in the reading, reported that the others had begun speaking in unison by the poem's end, their voices harmonizing in ways that human vocal cords shouldn't be able to achieve. The recording itself became another part of the legend. People who watched the video reported hearing additional voices in the background, whispers, screams, and sounds that resembled demonic laughter. Audio analysis revealed frequencies that shouldn't exist in normal human speech. The video was eventually removed from all platforms, but copies continue circulating in darker corners of the internet. They're accompanied by warnings that watching the footage can trigger secondary curses, making viewers susceptible to the poem's influence, even without reading it themselves. Contemporary technology has amplified the poem's potential reach. Text-to-speech software has been used to create audio versions, with predictably disastrous results for anyone who listens. AI poetry generators trained on Japanese literature sometimes produce verses that echo Tomino's hell, leading to concerns about accidentally recreating the curse through artificial intelligence. The poem has also inspired protective rituals and countermeasures. Some people carry written versions as talismans, believing that possessing the text without reading it aloud provides protection against other supernatural threats. Others perform cleansing ceremonies after silently reading it, just in case the curse can transfer through mental engagement. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Tomino's hell is its literary merit. Despite its reputation for supernatural danger, it's genuinely excellent poetry. The imagery is powerful, the narrative structure is compelling, and the emotional impact is undeniable. This creates a tragic irony. The poem might be Saijo Yaso's greatest artistic achievement, but it can never be properly experienced. Poetry is meant to be spoken, to use voice and breath to bring words to life. Tomino's hell is imprisoned in silence, its full artistic power forever locked away by the danger of its expression. Literature professors avoid including it in courses, poetry competitions ban it from recitation events, and publishers sometimes include warning labels in collections that contain it. It's become the artistic equivalent of radioactive material, beautiful to observe but deadly to handle directly. The legend has made the poem more famous than it probably would have been based on artistic merit alone. People seek it out specifically because of its dangerous reputation, drawn by the same fascination that makes forbidden things irresistible. Some scholars argue that this fame is the poem's true curse, not supernatural retribution, but the burden of being forever defined by superstition rather than artistic value. Saijo Yaso created a work of genuine literary power that will never be appreciated for its poetry because people are too terrified to experience it properly. And somewhere in Tokyo tonight, someone is looking at those verses, feeling the words press against their consciousness, demanding to be spoken. They know the stories, understand the danger, but the poem has its own gravity, its own irresistible pull toward vocal expression. Speaking of irresistible pulls and communications from beyond the grave, let's answer the phone call that might be coming from someone who really shouldn't have your number anymore. Part 15. The Raikon Phone Call. Your phone rings at 3:17 a.m., jolting you awake from deep sleep. The caller ID shows a number you recognize immediately, and your heart stops. It's your grandmother's number. Your grandmother, who died 3 months ago. You stare at the glowing screen, wondering if you're still dreaming. But the phone keeps ringing, insistent and real. You remember disconnecting her landline after the funeral, settling her accounts, clearing out her apartment. The number shouldn't exist anymore. Against every rational instinct, you answer. Hello. Silence. Then faintly, a voice you know as well as your own. Hello, dear. It's her voice, exactly as you remember it. The slight rasp from decades of smoking, the warm tone she used when she was happy to hear from you, the particular way she pronounced certain words. This isn't someone pretending to be her. This is her. Grandma. Your voice comes out as a whisper. I've been trying to reach you. There's something I need to tell you. Your hands are shaking. Grandma, you died. I was at your funeral. I know, dear, but death isn't what we thought it was, and you're in danger. Meet the Raikon phone call, the supernatural phenomenon that's turned missed calls into messages from the afterlife and made caller ID absolutely useless for screening unwanted communications. Raikon, literally meaning spirit or soul, refers to the essence of deceased individuals that occasionally manages to bridge the gap between life and death through modern telecommunications. They're not trying to scare you, quite the opposite. They're calling to warn you about impending disasters, give final messages they couldn't deliver before dying, or provide information that could save your life, which somehow makes it worse than if they were just trying to terrorize you. The phenomenon emerged in the 1990s as mobile phones became ubiquitous in Japan. Suddenly, people began receiving calls from numbers that belonged to recently deceased friends and family members. The conversations were brief, urgent, and invariably concerned with the living person's welfare. The calls always come at psychologically vulnerable moments, late at night when you're alone, during times of stress or uncertainty, or just before significant life events. The timing isn't coincidental. The dead seem to know when you're most in need of guidance or warning. What makes Raikon calls particularly unsettling is their helpfulness. These aren't malevolent spirits trying to drag you into the afterlife. They're concerned relatives and friends who've discovered that death doesn't automatically sever emotional connections to the living world. A typical call might warn about a car accident you'll have tomorrow unless you take a different route, or inform you that the chest pains you've been ignoring require immediate medical attention. Sometimes they provide information about hidden family secrets, lost objects, or unfinished business that only the deceased would know. The accuracy rate is disturbingly high. People who heed the warnings consistently avoid the predicted disasters. Those who dismiss the calls as hallucinations or hoaxes often find themselves facing exactly the situations they were warned about. One of the most documented cases involved a businessman who received a call from his deceased father, warning him not to board a specific flight. The man initially dismissed it as stress-induced imagination, but the call's emotional impact made him change his travel plans at the last minute. The flight he was supposed to take crashed, killing all passengers. The technical aspects of Raikon calls defy explanation. The numbers show up accurately on caller ID, but when authorities investigate, they find the lines have been disconnected for weeks or months. Phone company records show no outgoing calls from those numbers, yet the conversations are real, recorded by voice recognition software and witnessed by multiple people when calls occur in group settings. Some calls come from numbers that never existed, combinations of digits that were never assigned to any phone system. Others originate from phones that were destroyed, buried with their owners, or lost in accidents. The deceased seem capable of creating functional phone connections from pure spiritual energy. The voices are always perfectly recognizable to the recipients, not similar to the deceased person's voice, identical, speech patterns, vocabulary choices, even breathing patterns match exactly. If the dead person had distinctive accents or spoke multiple languages, these characteristics persist in their Raycon calls. But there are subtle differences that mark these conversations as supernatural. Background sounds often include elements that shouldn't exist. Wind when the deceased is calling from indoors, echoes that suggest vast empty spaces, or very faint sounds that might be other voices speaking in unknown languages. The calls typically last only a few minutes. The deceased seem to have limited time or energy for communication, focusing on delivering essential information rather than casual conversation. Attempts to extend the calls or ask questions about the afterlife usually result in disconnection. Some recipients report that the deceased sound distant or tired, as if the effort of communication across the boundary between life and death is exhausting. Others describe voices that seem to come from very far away, despite the clear connection quality. Modern smartphone technology has added new dimensions to the phenomenon. Raycon calls now include text messages from deceased individuals, often containing photos that show impossible locations or images that weren't in the person's phone when they died. Video calls occasionally occur, though the visual quality is typically poor and shows the deceased in environments that don't correspond to any known locations. Social media has complicated matters further. Deceased individuals sometimes post messages or comments on their own accounts months after death, despite passwords being changed and devices being destroyed. These digital communications follow the same pattern as phone calls, helpful warnings or important information delivered from beyond the grave. The psychological impact on recipients varies dramatically. Some find comfort in continued contact with deceased loved ones, interpreting the calls as evidence that death isn't final and that caring relationships persist beyond physical existence. Others are traumatized by the experience, unable to process the reality of communication with the dead. Family members often struggle with whether to share news about Raycon calls. How do you tell someone that their dead grandmother called to warn them about a gas leak? How do you explain that you know about hidden family assets because your deceased uncle provided the information during a 3 a.m. phone conversation? The calls have created a new form of supernatural inheritance, information and warnings passed from the dead to the living through telecommunications technology. Some families have learned to expect and rely on posthumous guidance from deceased relatives, making major life decisions based on advice received through Raycon calls. But the phenomenon raises disturbing questions about the nature of death and consciousness. If the dead can use phones, what other technology might they access? Are they watching through security cameras, reading emails, accessing social media accounts? The boundary between privacy and supernatural surveillance becomes uncomfortably blurred. Some Raycon calls appear to be final communications, one last chance for the deceased to say goodbye or resolve unfinished emotional business. These conversations often include apologies, declarations of love, or forgiveness for past conflicts. Recipients describe feeling a sense of closure that they didn't achieve during the person's actual death. But other calls suggest that death might not provide the peace that religious traditions promise. The deceased sometimes sound confused, lost, or unable to understand their new state of existence. They might call repeatedly, asking for help with problems that the living can't solve. The most disturbing calls come from people who died violently or suddenly. These spirits often seem unaware that they're dead, calling to report their accidents or ask for help that can't be provided. Emergency responders have learned to investigate reports of mysterious phone calls from accident scenes, as they sometimes provide crucial information about victims or circumstances. Technology companies have been reluctant to acknowledge or investigate the phenomenon officially. Rikon calls challenge basic assumptions about how communication systems work and raise questions that technical support wasn't trained to handle. But unofficially, some telecommunications workers report unusual patterns in call routing systems, connections that shouldn't exist, routing paths that violate network architecture, and billing anomalies for calls that originate from disconnected numbers. The dead, it seems, have found ways to hack the phone system. Your grandmother's call ended with her voice fading gradually, as if she was walking away from the phone. "Be careful on Thursday," were her last words. "Take the train instead of driving, and tell your mother I love her." The line went dead, leaving you staring at your phone in the darkness, wondering whether you'd just received genuine supernatural guidance or experienced the most vivid dream of your life. Thursday is tomorrow. Speaking of voices that shouldn't exist and whispers that follow you home, let's meet the spirit who's perfected psychological warfare through repetitive audio torture. Part 16. The Whispering Woman. You first notice her voice on Tuesday morning while waiting for the train to work. It's barely audible, a woman's voice speaking in Japanese somewhere behind you in the crowd. You can't make out the words, but the tone is urgent, almost pleading. You turn around, trying to locate the speaker, but see only the usual collection of commuters staring at their phones, or sleeping standing up. The whispering stops. By Wednesday evening, you're hearing it again. This time in the grocery store, following you down the cereal aisle, the same woman's voice, speaking just quietly enough that you can't understand the words but loudly enough to know someone is definitely talking. You spin around quickly, hoping to catch her in the act. But the aisle is empty except for an elderly man examining rice prices who clearly isn't whispering anything to anyone. Thursday brings the voice to your apartment. You're watching television when you hear it coming from the kitchen. That same urgent female whisper. You mute the TV and listen carefully. She's definitely in there, speaking continuously in low, rapid Japanese that sounds increasingly agitated. But when you investigate, the kitchen is empty. No hidden radios, no open windows, no logical source for the voice, just the gentle hum of your refrigerator and the growing certainty that you're losing your mind. By Friday, she's whispering directly into your ear. Meet the Whispering Woman, the spirit who's turned psychological warfare into an art form and made paranoia feel like a perfectly reasonable response to everyday situations. She's an invisible presence that attaches herself to specific individuals, following them everywhere and providing constant, barely audible commentary that drives her victims to mental collapse. She doesn't appear visually, she's purely auditory, a voice without a body that maintains a running dialogue with people who never asked for her company. The whispers start subtly. Victims initially dismiss them as background conversation from nearby people, audio bleeding from electronic devices, or simply imagination. But the voice gradually becomes more persistent, more personal, and impossible to ignore. What makes the Whispering Woman particularly insidious is her content. She doesn't just make random noise. She provides detailed commentary about her victim's life, relationships, and secrets. She knows things she shouldn't know, discusses people she's never met, and offers opinions about situations she couldn't possibly understand. The whispers begin as general observations about the victim's daily routine. She might comment on their clothing choices, criticize their posture, or offer unsolicited advice about their work performance. Initially, these seem like intrusive thoughts or internal self-criticism made audible. But gradually, her knowledge becomes more specific and more disturbing. She mentions the names of childhood friends the victim hasn't thought about in years. She references embarrassing incidents from their past that they've never shared with anyone. She discusses their private fears, secret desires, and hidden shames with the casual familiarity of someone who's been watching their entire life. The psychological impact is devastating. Victims become hyper-vigilant, constantly listening for her voice and analyzing everything she says. They lose sleep, avoid social situations, and begin questioning their own sanity. Some develop auditory processing disorders, unable to distinguish her whispers from normal conversation. The voice follows victims everywhere, She whispers in crowded restaurants during important meetings while they're trying to sleep. She provides running commentary during intimate moments, criticizes their parenting skills, and offers contradictory advice about major life decisions. What's particularly cruel is her timing. She speaks most frequently during moments when victims need to concentrate: job interviews, first dates, important conversations with family members. She has an uncanny ability to interfere with crucial life events, destroying opportunities and relationships through her perfectly timed distractions. The content of her whispers varies between victims, but certain patterns emerge. She often claims to be trying to help, offering warnings about people who can't be trusted or situations that might become dangerous. But her advice is consistently contradictory and usually makes situations worse. Some victims report that she speaks in multiple voices, as if different spirits are taking turns providing commentary. Others describe her voice changing in pitch and tone throughout the day, sometimes sounding young and innocent, other times old and bitter. The whispers aren't always in Japanese. Victims who speak multiple languages report that she switches between them, often mid-sentence, as if testing their comprehension. Some claim she speaks in languages they don't recognize, using words that sound ancient or otherworldly. Modern technology offers no relief. The voice persists through noise-cancelling headphones, continues during phone conversations, and even interrupts audio recordings when victims try to document their experiences. She seems to exist in a frequency that can penetrate any barrier designed to block sound. Medical examination typically reveals no hearing abnormalities or psychological disorders that would explain the experience. Brain scans show normal activity patterns, and standard tests for auditory hallucinations come back negative. Yet the victims continue hearing her voice with perfect clarity. The phenomenon appears to be selective. Not everyone can hear the whispering woman, even when she's actively tormenting someone nearby. Family members, friends, and colleagues remain oblivious while the victim suffers through constant commentary that only they can perceive. This isolation makes the experience even more traumatic. Victims can't prove their torment to others, can't seek support from people who understand, and can't find relief through shared experience. They're alone with a voice that knows everything about them and won't stop talking. Some victims attempt to communicate directly with the whispering woman, asking questions or demanding that she leave them alone. These conversations usually make the situation worse. She responds to engagement by increasing the frequency and intensity of her whispers, as if attention encourages her presence. Others try various methods of spiritual protection, carrying religious artifacts, performing cleansing rituals, or seeking help from priests and spiritual advisors. Results are inconsistent. Some report temporary relief, while others find that religious intervention makes her angry and more persistent. The most disturbing cases involve victims who begin to rely on the whispering woman's commentary despite its harmful effects. They become addicted to her constant presence, feeling lonely and anxious when she's quiet. They start making decisions based on her advice, even when it consistently leads to negative outcomes. These victims describe her voice as becoming more motherly and protective over time, as if she's genuinely concerned about their welfare. They begin to see her as a supernatural companion rather than a tormentor, despite the obvious damage she's causing to their mental health and relationships. The longest documented case involved a woman who heard the whispering woman for over 20 years. She learned to interpret the spirit's moods, understand her preferences, and even anticipate her reactions to different situations. By the end, she was having full conversations with the invisible presence, treating her like a roommate who happened to be dead and incorporeal. When the whispers finally stopped, suddenly and without explanation, the woman fell into deep depression. She'd become so accustomed to constant supernatural commentary that silence felt like abandonment. She spent her remaining years trying to summon the whispering woman back, desperate to restore the relationship that had defined her adult life. Some researchers theorize that the whispering woman represents internalized social anxiety made manifest. In a culture that emphasizes group harmony and social awareness, she might be the physical embodiment of constant self-monitoring and criticism that many people experience internally. Others suggest she's a form of spiritual parasite that feeds on attention and emotional energy. The more distress she causes, the stronger she becomes, creating a cycle where her presence reinforces itself through the victim's suffering. But perhaps the most disturbing theory is that she's exactly what she appears to be, a dead woman who's found a way to continue participating in the living world through forced conversation with unwilling listeners. She might be desperately lonely, having discovered that death doesn't provide the peace or resolution she expected. The whispers in your ear are getting clearer now. You can make out individual words, recognize the pleading tone, understand that she's trying to tell you something important about the person sitting next to you on the train. But you're not going to listen. Are you? Speaking of listening to things you shouldn't, and entertainment that turns deadly, let's tune in to the television commercial that proved advertising really can kill. Part 17. The Cursed Kleenex Commercial. You're watching late-night television in 1986, flipping through channels during a commercial break in some forgettable variety show. The advertising is typical for the era, overly cheerful jingles, families celebrating mundane products, and enough neon colors to power a small city. That's when the Kleenex commercial comes on. It's different from the usual fare, quieter, more artistic. The screen shows a beautiful young woman in a flowing white dress, standing in what appears to be a traditional Japanese home. She's holding a white tissue, examining it with an expression of serene contentment. The music is haunting, a traditional melody played on shamisen that sounds both ancient and otherworldly. There are no cheerful voices praising the product's absorbency or comparing it to competitors, just the woman, the tissue, and that hypnotic music. She turns toward the camera and smiles. Her face is painted in traditional geisha style, white foundation, dark-lined eyes, crimson lips. She's beautiful in an ethereal way that seems almost supernatural. As the commercial progresses, something feels wrong. The woman's movements are too fluid, too graceful. Her smile never wavers, but her eyes seem to be looking directly at you through the television screen. The music begins to sound less like traditional Japanese instruments and more like voices, whispered words in a language you don't recognize. The commercial ends with text displaying the Kleenex logo, but the woman's image lingers for just a moment longer than it should. Her smile seems to widen slightly, and you could swear you hear her laugh, a sound that definitely wasn't part of the original audio. You change channels, disturbed by the experience but unable to articulate why a tissue commercial has left you feeling so unsettled. By morning, you've forgotten about it entirely. 3 days later, you're found dead in your apartment with no apparent cause. Meet the Cursed Kleenex commercial, the advertisement that proved marketing really can kill and made watching television a potentially fatal activity. The commercial aired for only a few weeks in 1986 before being pulled from Japanese television networks. During that brief period, it generated more supernatural urban legends than any 30-second advertisement in history. Viewers who saw it reported nightmares, strange accidents, and mysterious deaths that seemed connected to their exposure to the haunting imagery. The commercial featured actress and model Keiko Matsuzaka, though she later denied any involvement in the production. The setting was a traditional Japanese house that investigators could never locate. The music was composed specifically for the advertisement, but no record exists of who created it or what instruments were actually used. What made the commercial particularly unsettling was its deviation from typical advertising aesthetics. While other commercials from the period were bright, energetic, and obviously artificial, the Kleenex advertisement felt dreamlike and otherworldly. It looked more like a short film about supernatural encounters than a product promotion. Viewers began reporting strange experiences almost immediately. Many described feeling hypnotized while watching, unable to change channels or look away until the commercial ended. Others reported that the woman in the advertisement seemed to be watching them specifically, making eye contact through the television screen. The most disturbing reports involved people who claimed the commercial continued after it should have ended. They described additional footage where the woman approached the camera, her expression becoming increasingly menacing. Some reported hearing her speak, though her words were always in a language they couldn't identify. Within weeks of the commercial's debut, viewers began dying under mysterious circumstances. The deaths showed no obvious pattern, different ages, locations, and apparent causes, but they all shared one common factor. The victims had watched the Kleenex commercial within 72 hours of their deaths. A university student collapsed during a lecture, dying from what appeared to be sudden cardiac arrest despite having no history of heart problems. A businessman was found dead in his office, sitting upright at his desk with no signs of trauma or illness. An elderly woman died peacefully in her sleep, but a family reported that she had been speaking about the beautiful woman in white for days before her death. The death toll reached 17 confirmed cases before television networks pulled the commercial from rotation. The official reason given was scheduling conflicts, but industry insiders reported that executives were genuinely frightened by the mounting evidence linking the advertisement to viewer deaths. Kleenex Corporation denied any knowledge of supernatural elements in their advertisement and claimed that the commercial had been produced by a third-party agency that no longer existed. When investigators attempted to trace the production company, they found that its business registration had been falsified and its listed address was an empty lot. The actress who portrayed the woman in white became a focal point of the investigation. Several women claimed to be the model, but none could provide evidence of their involvement. Photography sessions couldn't be verified, contracts didn't exist, and payment records were never found. Some investigators suggested that the woman in the commercial wasn't human at all, but a supernatural entity that had somehow been recorded and broadcast to millions of viewers. Others theorized that the commercial contained subliminal images or sounds that triggered fatal psychological responses in susceptible individuals. Analysis of the commercial's audio revealed unusual frequency patterns that didn't match any known musical instruments. Some experts suggested that the soundtrack contained infrasound, frequencies below human hearing that can cause feelings of unease, anxiety, and physical discomfort. But technical analysis couldn't explain the most disturbing aspect of the commercial. People who had never seen it began describing its imagery in precise detail. They reported dreams about a woman in white holding tissues, traditional music that haunted their sleep, and overwhelming feelings of dread associated with the Kleenex brand. The commercial had somehow infected the collective unconscious, spreading its influence beyond the people who had actually viewed it. Children who were too young to understand television described seeing the sad lady with white face in their bedrooms at night. Modern attempts to locate copies of the commercial have been largely unsuccessful. Television archives claim no record of its existence. Advertising museums don't have it in their collections. Even unofficial recordings made by viewers seem to have vanished. A few low-quality copies have surfaced on internet forums over the years, but they typically disappear within days of being posted. Users who claim to have downloaded the files report that their computers malfunction afterward, displaying images of the white-dressed woman even when the video isn't playing. The curse has apparently adapted to digital distribution. People who watch online copies report the same supernatural experiences as original television viewers: strange dreams, unexplained accidents, and mysterious illnesses that develop within days of viewing. Some digital versions seem to be longer than the original 30-second advertisement, containing additional footage that shows the woman moving through different rooms of the traditional house. These extended versions often end with her approaching the camera so closely that her face fills the entire screen, revealing details that weren't visible in the broadcast version. The most disturbing digital copies include interactive elements that shouldn't exist in video files. Viewers report that the woman responds to their presence, turning to look at them when they move or speaking their names despite never having provided that information to any website. Paranormal researchers have theorized that the commercial serves as a form of supernatural broadcasting system, allowing entities from other dimensions to communicate with or influence people in the physical world. The advertisement might have been an accidental portal, created by filmmakers who unknowingly captured something that shouldn't exist. Others suggest that the commercial was deliberately created as an occult weapon, designed to cause psychological damage or spiritual contamination in viewers. The traditional Japanese setting and imagery might have been chosen specifically to tap into ancient spiritual forces that most people don't understand or protect against. The Kleenex brand itself suffered lasting damage from the incident. Sales dropped significantly in Japan for several years, and the company eventually redesigned its packaging and advertising strategy to distance itself from the cursed commercial. But the legend persists, spreading through online communities dedicated to lost media and supernatural phenomena. People actively search for copies of the commercial, driven by the same morbid curiosity that makes forbidden things irresistible. Some claim that watching the commercial isn't inherently fatal, that it requires specific conditions or psychological states to trigger its deadly effects. Others insist that anyone who views it is doomed, regardless of their beliefs or precautions. The truth may be that the cursed Kleenex commercial represents something more disturbing than supernatural advertising, evidence that mass media can carry influences that we don't understand, reaching into people's homes and minds in ways that challenge our assumptions about reality and safety. And somewhere in the digital archives of the internet, that 30-second advertisement continues to exist, waiting for the next curious viewer to discover why some entertainment is better left lost. Speaking of discoveries that are better left alone and familiar comforts that turn into sources of terror, let's explore the urban legend that made every pet owner paranoid about what might be lurking under their bed.